Yep.
That's right. The minute he got discharged, he bought a saw.
There you go. Yeah, my.
He loved it. So one time I wanted to put on a memorial honor wall.
Yeah.
I said, Dad, I need your discharge. He goes, you can't put me on that wall. That's for you. It was the greatest vacation of my life. I had so much fun. He went to the Pacific, and he fished out. He got a boat to sit there on the deck chair.
Yep.
He did nothing because it was the only way he came to do it.
Yeah.
He loved doing the sun.
Yeah.
He had his drumming coat.
Of course.
And
Of course.
So he got down there, on the seagoing tug. He went to Honolulu.
Oh, rough.
From the port of Los Angeles. It was like April 1945.
Okay.
So nothing was going on really.
Yeah.
And he went, and he goes, the Japanese were those places to torpedo on this thing. He goes, you go across the Pacific at 10 knots. So
Oh yeah.
cruise. And then he got out there, and he went into Honolulu, picked up some Paris.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Went to Honolulu, went to Honolulu,
Yeah.
dropped the wall, and then went to the targets for the invasion of Japan.
Oh yeah.
It was a cakewalk.
Yeah. Well, I had an uncle of mine. He was aboard. He was assigned to the USS Arizona, and he was on a day pass because my aunt had flown in from Newfoundland. And so he saw all his ship needs to get blown to hell at Pearl Harbor, and so he survived that. And then I had another uncle that was a B-17 navigator. He got shot down 3 times over in Germany. Third time he got captured, sent to a POW camp. And then my other uncle, we just got the okay from the federal government. My other uncle's Dutch Vankirk, the navigator for the Enola Gay. Military. Yeah, my dad's retired. My uncle's retired. You know, my mom's dad was, with my mom being from Canada, they all speak French. They're all taught French from school age all the way through high school. And he was a spy for the Allies in North Africa because he could speak French. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Yep, PTSD. Yep, PTSD. Oh yeah. 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 Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Later on, actually, I found out very later on that he went in the wall to see where his wife now.
Yeah.
And he's laying down and killed everybody on board. So that was the thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Feeling guilty
That he survived. Yeah. Yeah, my uncle that went to the prisoner of war camp, the Stalags. Yeah, it took him years and years and years before he talked about it. But just like all of them from World War II, what did they go to for coping? Drinking. And so, yeah. Oh, back then, yeah. Yeah, they. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Right. I gotta fix something here. It's been bothering me. Eagles facing the wrong way.
You just suddenly remembered that, huh?
Well, yeah, well, it was on my mind, and I had other things going on. It's like,
Last time I looked at the website, that's why I walked in, I don't remember. I looked at the website, it said they changed the time. And it was actually
5:30.
yeah. No problem.
They were at 5 o'clock, and I had to pose the 5 o'clock shift. I thought, there's too many people who just can't get here by 5.
Yeah.
So we compromised.
5:30. Yeah.
No, you don't have to, but I would love it if you
we have
would.
long stuff, so that way we're not
Because
here for
yeah,
hours. Yeah. Oh,
you started the meeting with that.
It gets to be down below $5 an hour.
I'm one of those people that believe if you're going to be accused of doing something, you might as well have the enjoyment of doing it.
That's right. And then I can say that I don't want him in the meeting, right?
Right?
He's on the
How's that going?
Yeah.
Oh, we're still waiting on the
I don't know if
results.
it's his new boss or not.
No,
I don't know if that's his
no.
new boss.
I have an appointment this Thursday with orthopedics. And then next Wednesday is the follow-up point with infectious disease. And they should have the results then. And have a game plan of how to move forward.
Yeah.
And they don't want me using my left arm, so they're like, keep it in this. That way the blood don't pump it through and cause it to spread.
Right.
I'm like, oh, very good.
I'm used to that.
I'm like, they got them right-handed. So, yeah, I've been having fun. How are you?
I've just had a long busy week. This recently.
Yeah, I'm out of
If I hadn't seen you, I would have seen you since then. I
Survey
feel like
Okay.
this year's already started, we've done
students out at a 300-acre ranch in Welder, and put them through their paces for a week. And we had 5 or 6 surveyors out there.
Yeah.
Yesterday was mine. I was in charge yesterday, but I don't
15
stay out there. I commute, so it's I commute every day.
We're counting. We're
Spend 8 or
counting
10
it.
hours out there.
Phil, what do you think about
9.
Jim's coaching hire?
I had not heard. Oh, wait. Oh, thank you.
3, 2,
Nope.
no, it's not him.
But yeah, so Munchkin's up in Rhode Island now. They've bumped them up 2 weeks.
Oh, good. Yeah, I kept seeing him at the store and thinking, aren't you supposed to? I thought when they called him, they were real, so.
Well, initially they told him he wasn't on the list.
Yeah. After
Well, yeah.
Bobby, that's the guy that was in all the trouble with
But yeah, so
It's so funny that there are 3 or 4 Christopher Martinez
yeah, you wouldn't
in the
in
application.
this area.
controversy for years.
Yeah,
But you know what? Hey, he got it.
Bobby Petrino.
yes.
Oh, yes,
Rightfully
yeah.
so. I don't think that he.
I guess the mayor should be here
Well,
soon.
and that's just it, you know.
He's on a call in his
He's
office.
still on the call, but I guess what we can do is start and,
When he
I'll
comes in.
start the live stream's on, but I'll start the recording whenever you wish.
okay. And, because, let's do that. I'll call the meeting to order.
Okay.
There it goes.
Look at that.
We tried.
One official act.
We tried so hard.
It's 1 minute.
The recording's going.
But he did call it to order already, so.
I did call to order. You don't have to say call to order.
I appreciate that. Let the record show that the mayor is 1 minute late.
No, we haven't even gotten to the agenda yet, so you're okay. Everything's roll call.
Are you okay if I take over?
5:30.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we don't have a time yet.
They didn't have to ask.
What time did you call the meeting to order?
We haven't-
And I was going to say it when you walked in, but now you can take over.
So I just need a time that we're calling.
5:30.
It was 5:31.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Okay. I guess we didn't do the roll call. All right, now do the roll call.
Sheena Martinez, District 1.
Paul Carrier for District 2.
Bill King, District 3.
Harold Stein, District 4.
Herb Dyer, District 5.
And Darren Schroeder, Mayor. Please stand with me for the pledges of allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. To the American flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Texas.
Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Pastor John from Vista Community Church, thank you.
Dear God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this beautiful weather today. And we pray that you would help us all to always be grateful for the goodness that we experience, even in this nation, this state, and this town, Lord. We thank you for this body here that will help with the governance of Castroville, and we just pray that you bless them and help them and give them wisdom to handle everything that is put before them with grace and honor. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. All right, next item is citizens' comments. If anybody would like to get up for citizens' comments, please state your name and your address, and we just ask that you limit the comments to 3 minutes. Do we have anybody that would like to speak for citizens' comments?
I guess I will start.
There you go.
Good evening, I'm Brian Griffin. I know some of you, and I'm glad to see, I see some familiar faces from my block walk the other night. I live at 716 Lafayette, and my comment is in regards to the water line project that is going on down Lafayette. First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor and my councilman for kind of getting things rolling and helping us with the communication that we passed out to the citizens there on Lafayette. That was a big help. I think it gave a lot of information to people, even if they weren't able to show up. I did get a lot of feedback from those citizens that I was able to talk to in regards to the project, some of their feelings about it, and what they're hoping to see in the future. The big takeaways were, one, initially their comments are, oh, you were referring to the mess. That was their first comment. But after some conversation and kind of going over the summary that was in the cover sheet and in the white paper that y'all put together, the end result usually was, well, I know that the project needed to happen. I know that we needed to upgrade these pipelines. And they were grateful for the fact that that was getting done, but they still had reservations about the process. And so I'll just fall back to my personal experience with it. My house is right on the corner of Lafayette and Naples, which happens to be the connection point for the project. And so obviously the disruption that occurred at my residence was started on day one. I must say the contractors, I think, did their best to try and not inconvenience people, although there were several times that it did become an inconvenience to not only myself, but to my neighbors across the street, the Bipperts, who also were affected by the fact that that was the primary spot where this project started. I would have, I'll just make couple of comments in regards to the project. One requirement that I'm going to have to probably either talk to Public Works or the contractor in regards to my personal property. And that, just to start off with, I would suggest in future projects that the council possibly consider, when looking at the contractor and the contractor's bid, that you strongly consider using pipe chases across roadways instead of just cutting off roadways completely. That was the biggest inconvenience having to do with this project, because obviously it was multiple blocks all across the area parallel to Highway 90. So everybody who lived south of that area had to either go around or try and pick a spot. Yeah, the mayor knows well. So I would say I would make that consideration, or at least the possibility of boring under roadways. I know that's kind of expensive for a temporary water line, which was the main reason why the roadways were cut, I believe, since they were using surface piping. But I would look at those two options. I know it costs money, but as a taxpayer in the city, I don't mind paying for convenience. That's the bottom line. And I know that in some cases when you're letting out a contract, it's going to cost more money to do those convenient things. The second comment in regards to the project and how it was let out, I would strongly urge that either you require the contractor to have more signage. I think they did their required signage. I think in talking to a couple of guys, I think they had their signs were out as per their contract. I would definitely look at either getting with the police chief, maybe somebody from one of the engineering companies to actually set up a viable traffic plan for these projects. Especially when we're using the method, I think, that we were employing, where you had to make these long runs to pull the sleeves, where you had to cut multiple blocks. I know, you know, that's a hard thing to do when you have traffic running through it. But I would strongly look at that. The problems that most of the homeowners that I talked to that were really disgruntled was the fact that they lived on a corner and people were cutting through their yards to get from one street to the other. As a matter of fact, I don't see Daniel here tonight, but he lives on the northwest corner of Lafayette and Naples, and he literally, myself and David Bippert were out having an evening conversation at the fence and witnessed two vehicles, one right after the other, simply turned. They were, you know, eastbound on Lafayette, and they just turned off the roadway, drove right through Daniel's front yard, a Mustang, and then a big four-wheel drive pickup truck. Didn't even blink, didn't stop, didn't tap the brakes, ran over the water lines, the whole bit. Subsequently, I think the city, I think y'all did send somebody out, and they ran barricades along Naples to discourage people from doing that, and I think some caution tape down at Lafayette. So, but prior to that, a lot of the homeowners were doing it themselves, and I just don't think that that's probably a good way to do business. I know I had to go out and put up some temporary barricades
I think
myself.
somebody borrowed some temporary fencing for...
Yeah, fencing, temporary barricades, some, you know, caution ribbon, that kind of stuff. It's a little unsettling when you're sitting there at your dinner table in the evening, and since I have a carport on the side of my house and you see an individual literally walk between your truck and the wall of your home through your carport to go from one street to the other. It's a little unsettling.
And I think that I appreciate the comments. I've let you go a little bit over just
I appreciate
because I know that we're going to talk about that in the agenda item. But let's go ahead. If it's all right, let's cut it off here, and then we'll reopen that when we open that agenda item in case anybody else has citizens' comments.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Thank you. I appreciate you doing all that work for us. Okay. Anybody else for citizens' comments?
My name is Patrick Connor. I live at 811 Washington Street. I'm here with the Friends of the Castroville Regional Park. Yesterday, we had a board meeting, and we decided to write a letter to the City Council and the Mayor and the City Administrator. I'd like to present that now.
Thank you.
Dear Mayor, City Council, and City Administrator, during our last board meeting, we passed a motion to express our gratitude for considering the development considerations for new parkland in the executive session for the City Council meeting. This board would like to give you a big thank you. As outlined in the 2020 Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the acquisition of new parkland is the #1 priority for Castroville's Regional Park and Recreation Department. Every square foot of new parkland acquired reduces extreme overuse of Castroville Regional Park. And again, thank you so much for acquiring new parkland and keeping it on the front burner, as well as your continued cooperation in our efforts to make Regional Park the best it is. And along those lines, while we're looking for city parks lands, I would like to present this to the mayor.
Thank you.
This is a brochure for the Texas Ag Land Trust. This is comprised of local farmers and ranchers that have participated in conservation easements on their property. And in this land search, I would hope that you would share that with these other property owners. Having worked with the Nature Conservancy and the Department of Agriculture developing conservation easements, I find that a very good way to negotiate with landowners for open spaces. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else for citizens' comments?
Thank you very much.
David Mers, 148 Village Path. In May 2022, City Council approved a zoning change for a hotel up to 50 feet or 4 stories at the end of the Country Village subdivision. My wife and I spoke that night, expressing our opposition and the opposition of many of our neighbors to such an increase of the height limit. You've had the pleasure of seeing me once or twice a month since then. That property is now for sale. The new owner may or may not feel like building a Hampton. I don't know if the P&D zoning will pass to a new owner, if other agreements made with the current owner will, or even if it will end up selling. I just urge council, like I did 8 months ago, to let it lie and give no further concessions. If we get a 50-foot tall Super 8, so be it. It's better than a subsidized 50-foot Super 8. Also, I saw on the agenda tonight that you're going to be discussing in closed session renewal of your contract with Mr. Dixon. I don't always agree with decisions he makes, but I think he does a great job for the city.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. It's been nice seeing you since then.
Good evening. Hi, Dr. Kathy Ewald. I'm a tenant at the airport. You know, the last few months there's been a lot of discussion about the airport and landowners and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about my story, just one little piece. When I was growing up, my parents didn't have a ton of money, didn't really know that as a kid, but one thing that they could afford to do was put enough gas in the car to drive over to the airport and park into a grassy area. And we could sit along the side of the road and we could watch the airplanes fly over. And my dad was fantastic. He always made a game out of it. How many would come? How big would they be? How close would we be? Would we be right under them? Would we park too far to the left, park too far to the right? And I just remember laying on the hood of the car and just watching these unbelievable machines that are in the air. And they're just ginormous things of so much metal and people and stuff, and just amazed me to no end. I would always have a million questions about how could they do that and how did they figure that out. And so I didn't know anything about aviation. I didn't know you could become a pilot. I didn't know a whole bunch of stuff. And I ended up just going in the Air Force so I could at least be around airplanes. And the reason there's so many other stories I could tell you. The Castroville Airport community, even among airport communities, is incredible right now. We've only been there since 2019, and I know there was a lot of stuff that happened in the past, but I can tell you the group that's there right now is amazing. They're doing great work with really, really old airplanes where they're restoring them and flying them and getting as many people that want to come out and fly them as possible and donating all their time and all their resources to do this. So I just wanted to tell you a little piece of my story. I'm a chatty Kathy. I'd be happy to tell you more, not in this, event, but because I want to try to help everybody to understand that not everybody at the airport is an elite, wealthy person that has come from generations of money. I am not a pilot, but I have an affinity for aviation because when I was little, we were able to go and watch the airplanes at the airport. And I hope that that is going to be available to this community for many, many generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a quick comment. We cannot comment about anything that is presented in citizens' comments, but all of these will have agenda items that cover them, so please do stick around for this. Do we have anybody else that would like to speak for citizens' comments? All right, great. Next item is consent agenda. Under the consent agenda, we have minutes for December 13th, 2022, regular called City Council meeting, the Stone Garden Grant Resolution, a contract with Vortex for cleaning and televising of approximately 29,032 linear feet of sanitary lines throughout the city in the amount not to exceed $160,000 for the contracted service. And the final item is approve $80,000 for tree trimming with Medina County Co-op for clearing and maintaining electric lines. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
I have to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second it.
Great. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Next item, the city administrator report. Do we have any, did you want to go over that, or did you want to just see if there's questions about it? Is there anything you want to highlight?
There are a couple
of things.
items that I would like to speak to, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
When you're ready. Ready?
Yes, please.
Ready, go. First, just on the municipal airport master plan, which had an impassioned speech from one of our tenants. One of the exciting things that's happening at the airport is this master plan. I know that some of you are aware of it. It's not quite ready for council presentation, but that should happen in the next probably 2 months or so. Because of that effort, it's like so many other planning efforts. If the city undertakes to do strategic long-term planning, facilities planning, whether it's downtown or the airport or our transportation planning that we're discussing, it puts you in a better position when there is funding available. And I know, like, for instance, we're going to have a drainage master plan discussed tonight. All of those things, we may not have the money to do everything that's listed in that report, but having that report actually puts you at the front of the line when money becomes available. And so there is actually some grant funding that's available right now for, it's a competitive grant. I believe it's a 90-10 that's related to our airport that will probably be coming to you. And a lot of that is we're going to be able to apply for it and be competitive in the application. Doesn't mean we'll get it, but we're going to be competitive or more competitive than we would have been because of this master plan. So just wanted to mention that to you. I think in the packet that was shared with you, there should have been some items, some items related to the master plan itself. Let me see what I included. Yeah. So this is, I believe I just completed this one page from the plan, but this just shows basically the consensus proposed land use plan. There were several that were developed. They all looked as intricate and busy as this one does. And I'm not intending to try and go over all this tonight, but I just wanted, for your benefit, have that in the packet and then be able to show the public kind of what we're looking at. I know one of the areas that was brought up when we had a public meeting, there was some real concern from the landowners that own this parcel, and they thought, oh my gosh, the city's going to take our land. And I want to make sure that I'm on the record and convey that that is not the city's intent. It is a part of our plan. If they're willing to sell the land and we're able to get it, and we have, everything works out, and we have the money to do this, this would be the desired expansion of the airport. It does not mean it will happen this way, but without a plan, it doesn't happen at all. And so we hope that we'll be able to have good conversations with that family or whoever owns the land now or in the future when this becomes something that's realistic for the city to pursue. So again, it's just kind of like when TxDOT goes through its thoroughfare planning. It doesn't mean those roadways are going to be built. What it does mean is that as there's expansion, as population continues to grow, they have a plan for that growth. And that way when developers and others come to them, they can say, okay, this is where we see the most efficient transportation to take place. The same thing is true of this airport master plan. So I just want to take a moment to mention that.
Some other key items on the airport master plan that I've noted with a couple of people. I'm really looking forward to this because you're right. The airport it's a jewel of the city. I think it's phenomenal. It's got a lot of impact to the community, a lot of positive impact to the community. One of the things that I heard people concerned about was the size of airplane and the number of operations, and it covers that really, really well. And it actually demonstrates that the size of airplane doesn't change, even with their expansion plans, and the frequency is not that great. So the overall impact to the community is pretty minimal. But I'm really looking forward to being able to give that presentation.
Good. Yeah, the goal is just to accommodate the type of traffic we have now and to be prepared for that growth. But yeah, we're not, I think there was also some concern about people, are we going to put passenger jets? No. There's technically very small passenger jets that are available today, but that's not going to change.
Well, hopefully they all have passengers.
Right. Well, technically.
We don't have any automated ones.
But we are not going to be the next international airport in San Antonio.
So on the master plan, is the fencing included? Or what's the status on the fencing? Because they've been having a lot of near misses with deer on the runway and everything.
Yeah, and in fact, there was a part of the inclusion of this was a letter that we received from a gentleman that flew into our airport, had some very positive comments to share, and I'll get to that in just a minute.
Okay.
But that will be something that would come forward on the CIP workshop, which is at the January 24th meeting. So It's not in the master plan. It's something for the city to try and tackle. And I think the staff is going to present you with an option for fencing. So.
Okay, thank you.
And you did call out on here, I just want to make sure that I acknowledge David Kirkpatrick with all of the effort that he spent with TxDOT Aviation, with the airport board, with staff time, just the amount of time and effort that was put into this. It was a phenomenal report. I really appreciate the amount of information. And I've heard from TxDOT Aviation, they said that he is one of my favorite airport managers. I'm like, one of?
Well, David had the distinction of being nominated as Airport Manager of the Year, and he's certainly worthy of that nomination. This is the letter that was mentioned. I won't read it, but it's in the packet. And yes, kudos to David for just the massive amount of projects that he's undertaken. He's had to deal with facility issues twice because of storm-related damage. Once when I think he'd been here for like a week or 3 days or something, and we got hit. He had to deal with it, and then more recently, last year, we had a similar thing that took our terminal building. Some people don't realize, but the roof literally pulled away, the walls pulled away, and that thing had to be reconstructed, and he oversaw that. And then, of course, the expansion with the USDA hangar project was not a small thing, but given his background in construction and management, he did a fantastic job doing that. So I think we are very blessed to have the staff that we have in many of the areas, but certainly David is no exception to that. He's fantastic. On CCTV and tree trimming consent items, now that you've already taken the vote, I just wanted to in the packet, I mentioned that in an effort to move the meetings along, things that are already approved in the CIP that the funding's already there for, and that's something else I want to clarify. If it's in the CIP, the money, and it's bond funds that are paying for it, technically those bond funds have already been earmarked for those purposes when you issued the bonds. So there is not a budget amendment that will be required, and I misstated that in my report. I was uncertain whether it would require a budget amendment or not, but in talking to our auditor, the CIP is a living document that it's not on our fiscal year. It's based on the CIP. So that should also carry weight when you think about what we're doing and how important it is, what's getting funded and what isn't in the CIP. If it's a funded item, you're making that decision at the time. We will continue to bring that forward, but if it's okay with y'all, I'll continue to do that. I'll put them on the consent, and then just know that any council member, for any reason, if you want to pull something off a consent, you can make a motion during the consent agenda to pull that off.
I just got one question. That we've been observing. Who's responsible for trimming the trees that overhang on 90?
That overhang 90?
Yeah, like Moist Center, they have all those trees there, and they have trees, they're actually overhanging onto Highway 90.
So they probably are responsibility.
And the tractor trailer is hitting them, and I mean, tree branches go flying.
Yeah.
And somebody could
I'll
get
have to
hurt
verify
real
that,
bad.
but typically TxDOT will do a city maintenance agreement where we're inside the city limits of the city, even though it's a state roadway.
Yeah.
The city's responsible for maintenance, but I'll verify that. But I appreciate you passing it on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the current tree trimming efforts are really focused on our protection of our electrical lines. And I just want to mention this. It's fairly expensive, as you saw tonight. We're spending $80,000 to $90,000 a year trying to get these trees cut back. They hadn't been substantially cut back in over 9 years, so there's quite a bit of growth, and that leads to outages. And that's the reason we're doing this, is to protect the city and protect our electric reliability to ensure that we don't have as many outages. We pay the people that are doing this by the hour, so they bill us for every hour they're out there. When someone comes out, a concerned citizen, and has a lot of questions about trees, how we're trimming them, we're paying those people to answer those questions. I would much prefer it if they reached out to me, our Public Works Director, John Gomez, or any of their council members if they have a complaint or issue. We want to hear those, but not at whatever it's costing us an hour to answer those questions. So, unfortunately, some of their tree trimming activities have been slowed down because of citizen involvement, and that citizen taxpayer waste, in my opinion. We're wasting money doing that. So, please be careful. The IT needs assessment, just make you aware that we are having that done. Council, as you may recall, approved going out and getting proposals for the needs assessment. So staff did that, and we selected
VC3 to do that work, and that'll commence here in the next couple of weeks, and I expect it to take 30 days or so. I do want to give kudos to Councilman Dyer. He did a tremendous amount of work putting together a draft IT policy, and literally going to every site, asking a million questions about what goes where, et cetera, taking pictures, and assembling that all into a policy document that I think will be very, very helpful to VC3 and to the IT consultant that we eventually hire to do the work for us. So I really appreciate those efforts. I think the policy itself will probably be brought forward to council once we have an IT consultant on board, so that they review that and provide their recommendations to council. Anyway, I just really appreciate the effort that was made. I also want to give kudos to our public works staff. So often sometimes no news is good news, and certainly with our utilities, that's definitely true. During this Christmas break, you may have noticed we didn't have any major issues that impacted large groups of customers, and I think a lot of that, it wasn't just left to chance. Our staff spent hours upon hours of prepping our system, having discussions about what to do in various types of emergencies, and making sure that they were prepared for those. And thankfully, we didn't experience anything major, and we were able to enjoy our holidays. And more importantly, they were able to enjoy their holidays at home with their families, because being called out in those situations is never fun either. So really I want to pass kudos to John Gomez and his leadership and just the team and everything you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job. I know you don't hear that enough, but I really appreciate it. You're doing a good job.
If I can just, if
Yes.
you don't mind, I want to call out as well. I grill you about all of these things. I like making mistakes only once, and there were some surprises that we had during the winter storm, during Snowmageddon. We learned some things, and John, you guys took those learnings, you implemented resolutions, you figured out how to deal with it. The kind of planning that went into that is absolutely perfect. That's what people appreciate, and the fact that there were no outages, even though we had some freezing temperatures and potential, I think that if you guys hadn't done that, we would have seen some system-wide outages or large-scale outages, and so that's the kind of service that I think that the citizens deserve and that you're absolutely providing. So phenomenal work. I can't tell you, I was nervous about it, but I was so impressed as I saw all of the stuff that you put together to make sure that didn't happen. Thank you.
Also, in that same line, talk about kudos to our police chief. And I think it was talked about at another meeting, but unfortunately, San Antonio is growing this direction, and we have people who don't live here but are casing our communities. They're looking through our neighborhoods. They're looking for vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and it's just an unfortunate reality is that for many people, they live in Castroville because Castroville still has, and this is one of the things I love about it, and I love about small town Texas, it still has the values of small town Texas. You can leave your door open at night and not worry about whether your keys are in the truck or that kind of thing. And unfortunately, it's just not the case anymore. We're still a small town with small town values, but there are people who are trying to take advantage of those. And we had something like 40 vehicle burglaries where people were breaking into vehicles. This was just before the Christmas break.
The 8th of December.
What's that? Yeah.
The 8th of December. Well, they tried to get in all three of my cars, and my camera caught them getting into one of our cars. They got into my neighbor's car, but it was all caught on camera. Everybody was wishing Loki came out.
Yeah. So they hit River Bluff, they hit Country Village, and I'm sure they hit other places. And we've had unfortunately, other incidents as well. But I just want to recognize Chief Kohler and Detective Knudsen and the whole team at the PD. I think they're doing a fantastic job. Yes. We do need more police officers. Unfortunately, with the slowdown in growth, with our residential development slowing down a little bit, that's going to cause us some issue in trying to keep up and be able to hire new folks. But I just want to congratulate and thank Chief Kohler and his police department. They're doing a fantastic job. So,
yes.
And with the coordination with the citizens and the proactive action and really the partnership with SAPD unit, they had the perpetrators in custody in I think it was 14 hours.
Yeah.
If they would not have acted on it right then, they would have lost it.
Well, one of the iPad was taken, and the owner had the locator on it, so that helped find So, yeah.
Well, they ended up finding like 3, that it was like a little bit of a breadcrumb trace, because
Yeah.
they would steal a vehicle and then dump that vehicle and then steal another vehicle. So they found several stolen vehicles in the process. And yes, the cooperation with the SAPD was fantastic. Be honest, it was the tenaciousness of our department, or the tenacity of it, because SAPD is huge, and they deal with this stuff every single day, and it's not as big a deal to them, frankly. And so it wasn't look like it was going to get resolved, but because of their tenacity, they got to the right person, the right group. They got with a task force at SAPD that specifically deals with this type of crime, and were able to solve it and actually catch the folks that did it. So just take that as a public service announcement. Please lock your doors, take your valuables out of your cars, don't be an easy target. Because unfortunately, although it may feel like Mayberry, and we want it to feel that way, and continue to feel that way, you still have to be safe and be careful.
I think it feels like Castroville.
We had we wrapped up our Light Up Castroville. So this is our second annual. This was kind of the mayor's brainchild last year. So we have winners that received a December credit, and I believe the top prize winners received they received up to a certain amount for their electric bill, and I believe all of them received, like, they didn't have to pay an electric bill in December because of the amount they owed and the amount they won. So congratulations to the folks who participated. This is something we hope will grow. I think it's something that adds charm to Castroville, to be able to see those Christmas lights or see people celebrating the holidays. And we appreciate the businesses and residents that participated in that. A grants update, I'm going to send to you separately. Ernie and Janice with EMC, I requested that they do a report. I mentioned to you all that I would be trying to get one. They did provide me one just this afternoon, so I will send that out to council. I also have an update from Fire Chief Clint Cook. He's doing some really impressive things with our fire department. One of the things that they're beginning to do is business familiarization, where they're familiarizing the fire department with each business, going in and having a fire plan, making sure that fire plans are known, understood, both between the fire department and that business owner. And I don't know whether that was taking place in the past or how long it was, but I'm certainly excited to see that he's undertaking to do that. So that's one of the many items he mentioned in his report, and I'll send that out to you as well. That was shared with me this afternoon. The CIP workshop, as I mentioned earlier, will be January the 24th. I provided in your packet the update that was provided to council in October, where we are on spending. It's probably changed a little bit, but not much. There might be a couple items on there that were not in progress yet when that report was delivered in October, or additional funds may have been expended. But that'll give you at least a general idea of where we stand on monies spent. Of course, the new borrowing for utilities is underway, so we will get another $5 million to spend on utility projects. Sounds like a lot of money. It really isn't. And one of the things that staff is trying to do is pair that money with grants and other funding sources as much as possible to make it go as far as possible. And hopefully, honestly, hopefully this economic slowdown is actually going to help get us better project bids. We'll see how that shakes out. Country Village is wrapping up. I don't know if we have any questions about that, but I do want to recognize Devin and his efforts. I think both he and the contractor at K-Freeze, just all around, it was a good team effort. Excellent communication. I really like where it's finished out as far as looking at those streets. I've driven them a couple times now. They're beautiful. I can't imagine that any of the residents are upset about having new streets, but we hear all kinds, right, Harold?
Well, I think that is the prime example of exactly the way that we need to communicate. So kudos to Devin, the plan that you put together with the door hangers, the proactive notification. I think we had a couple of minor hiccups that just inconvenience. A lot of those were out of our control, but it's a lot easier to swallow a lot of these things if you know about it in advance. And just the level of detail, I think that we can use that as a model for how we go forward with any kind of majorly, because that could have been majorly impactful. So phenomenal job on that.
So I read for the streets program for 2023, bid package for River Bluff. I thought we were doing streets after we finished the electrical, because it'd make no sense to spend millions on redoing our streets when it could get.
That is always the plan, yes.
Yeah, well, we talked about that, but we also have been looking at how much those would be disrupted, and so we may not need to delay them. And so,
Okay.
again, we're going to talk, I don't have a streets plan for you tonight.
Yeah.
But that'll be something that we are going to talk about, is which streets we're going to do and where and how, and one of them will be Lafayette. So that'll be, what we're doing is lumping the street types. So we have a hot mix, just like Country Village was done. There'll be a hot mix in River Bluff, so those will be hot mix streets. And then chip and seal streets like Lafayette.
Geneva and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's several others that we identified. Just as a reminder, kind of the way we classified these is kind of two ways. One is what's the current condition of the street, but then what are the utilities that are under that street or in that street that need to be fixed, and can we time this to fix the utility and then fix the street? So Lafayette, that's what we're doing. We're going to fix the utilities first, and then we'll come in and fix the street. So ideally, we don't have to disturb that street because we've got brand new utilities under them. Unfortunately, we aren't able to do that everywhere.
Yeah.
And so where we're prioritizing streets generally is either streets that are in conjunction with a utility project, or streets that have no utilities where the utilities have to be fixed. There's only a few of those. So that's how they made the list. I know there's some people will be looking at it going, why are we looking at that one and not mine? Well, probably because yours has utilities on it that we are under it that we are not able to get to right away. So
Okay, thank you.
quite a bit, as you can imagine, quite a bit of planning goes into doing those utility projects. So this was the CIP document that was shared with you. These are the streets and street projects. I'm really pleased. Some of the, again, plans, I think it's General MacArthur. It's one of those generals that said, plans are good until the first bullet's fired, and then everything goes to hell basically, because you're gonna change. And so certainly we've seen enough of that from some of our other planning efforts, but that was also true with the streets program. We had originally planned on lumping, not Berlin, but Amelia was going to be one of the chip and seal streets that we would do as part of a contractor, but thankfully the county stepped up and they did that street for us. So when you look at this original plan, that was not, we thought we'd have to pay to have that done, and as it turned out, all we had to do was pay for materials to the county to have them do it. So we'll be back to bring you a refresh of this plan and show that to you at the next council meeting. The next thing I wanted to show you is the Lions Park future land use plan. We are currently, you've seen the splash pad, it is built out. The restroom, and again, this is just kind of a generic plan. These aren't exactly where the squares are, where they're going to be, but the restrooms have now been put in place. The parking lot is in the process of being prepped. And additional improvements is the sports multi-field. So we're working with the members of the community to establish a multi-use playing field, and trying to make it as big as possible in order to accommodate as many types of sports as possible on that playing surface. That'll probably require us to rework the walking trail, so we'll improve and move the walking trail as part of that project. Also along with this, I think I mentioned it in my report, the Microsoft grant that we received for trees along Highway 90. We've worked with Microsoft to move those funds from Highway 90 to Lions Park. We will probably revisit that and see if we can't get another grant to do that along Highway 90, but the red tape and the time it was taking to deal with TxDOT and get that approved is longer than the grant really allows for. So
longer than I'm alive.
So we're excited about that because I think that's going to allow this park to have an even more finished look when it's done. There is a major element that I'm pretty excited about, and that's the future playground. We're trying to pursue a all-inclusive playground that allows for anybody with any type of disability, whether it's sight impairment or hearing impairment or physical disability, that they're able to enjoy that park, much like Morgan's Wonderland, but in a much, much smaller scale. And so staff has started reaching out to various businesses and others that might be able to help contribute towards that. And I think doing these other improvements, the multi-purpose field, the splash pad, the restrooms, the parking lot, improving the trail, all of that will give it a better finished look and encourage maybe more community investment in this park. So very excited about the changes that we're seeing at Lions Park, and once again, this is another project that Devin Frederickson's headed up. So,
and kudos to the park board for putting that together. Without that master plan that they put together, we wouldn't have the concepts, we wouldn't be able to move on things like this. So again, that planning effort, I think, has borne a tremendous amount of fruit.
and then I think that the last item on my report was the organizational change. This is something I think I alluded to probably several months ago. It's not the last change that I intend on making. There's probably some other changes that will come. And the effort is to realign us for growth and hopefully to make it a little bit more efficient. And so part of that effort has been giving the duties of the waste management contract management, so that's your trash and recycling. That's now been given over to Devin. He's been doing that basically for the last 3 or 4 months. And in concert with that, I'm taking the code enforcement officer position and the animal control officer position and combining those. It's something I've done in another city. It worked very, very well. Those are two areas that are complementary in a lot of ways, especially how they're conducted. And as we grow, rather, if you think about it this way, from an animal control's perspective, we have one person covering the whole city. As we grow, if we add 5,000 homes and more than double in size, we need at least one more animal control person, maybe 2, especially if we have an adoption facility. Code enforcement is the same way. But if you combine those duties and responsibilities, instead of having to add a code enforcement person and an animal control person every time you grow, you're adding one position. So it's a way of one, reducing costs, but also I think making it a little bit more efficient and providing a higher level of service to the community. So very excited to see that change finally taking place. We have a new animal control officer. You cannot miss him. His name is Josh. He's 6'5". He's a big dude and a very likable guy. I hope you get to meet him and get to know him. So we're excited that he's joined us, and the new parks building up on the hill, the water treatment plant is well underway. It's nearing complete finish out. I think there's a few small things that will be done over the next couple of weeks, but that's where these people will be housed. And with that, I'm changing the title for Devin Frederickson from he's been the Parks Director, Streets Director, kind of several things, to Community Services Director. So he'll be in charge of community services for the city. There is an area of community service that there's probably several that it doesn't have jurisdiction over just yet. So we still have community planning. It's separate. Brianna Soto is our director over that, leading that effort. And then the library is, I view that as a community service effort as well. Angela Alejandro will continue to be the library manager and will not be reporting to Devin at this point. But I do think this is a great growth opportunity for Devin, and I appreciate his willingness to step up and take on additional responsibilities, especially given that he and Jonah both have brand new kids at home that were just born in December. So it's a lot to take on for a growing family, but I certainly am appreciative of his effort. So that concludes my report. Do you have any questions, or are there any other things I might not have covered?
Yes.
Yes.
I got 2 questions. First, when I was looking at the slide with the general fund bond balance sheet and everything, I saw on the general fund and the utility fund that you have the northern bypass listed on both. Okay. Is it, why?
If I can, these are the types of items that we need to be sending in emails as questions beforehand.
If I'm not in
the hospital. Yes.
If I'm not in the hospital, I'm able to. So I was just, yeah,
I have to look at that and see why we would have put it in both places. But I know that there's going to be utility relocation and other things along those lines, so that may be why you see it at both places, or it could just be a mistake. I'll look
okay. I just asking to caught my eye.
Yeah.
The other thing, what's the reasoning for putting code enforcement and animal control underneath Devin, where their backup is normally the PD?
Well, that's another thing that we're trying to change. I want them to back up each other and not have PD be. I need to relieve the police department of having to do animal control. Okay. I would rather have our streets crew and our parks crew be backup
Okay.
So for some of those items, whether it's removing a dead animal or dealing with some of those types of issues, our streets crews is able to do that just as easily, or parks crew. And so Devin has kind of he's got a group, a team that he can rely on and build that support. But that's a big reason why is because our police department's already
Right.
understaffed. So I want to take duties away from them that they don't necessarily have to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the legal side then, if we have parks and streets backing up animal control and code enforcement with irate people, how does that sit legally?
Well, generally, they're not going to, so from a customer interaction,
Mhm.
any escalated issue is going to come to Devin still. And then it'll come to me, and then it'll go to the mayor or one of you, or however that works. But
It'll
from
come to us at the same
the
time.
way that when I say they're backing them up, maybe we're thinking about two different things. I'm thinking about just the physical labor that's required.
No.
If you're talking about, hey, we've got an enforcement-related issue, that'll continue to be a policing matter. So if, for instance, you're in your front yard and you and your neighbor are arguing about a code enforcement-related issue, you called to complain, our code enforcement officer's shown up and said, okay, you're right, this person did this thing and they really shouldn't have, and this is a violation, and they're going to try to work with that homeowner to get it resolved.
Right.
Meanwhile, you've got irate citizens at each other's throats. Not that that would ever happen here, but if just hypothetically, purely hypothetically, that were to happen, the police would still be the people
Okay.
you'd call. Yeah. I didn't mean that. I was talking about like just on a day-to-day.
Yeah, no, I was talking the other
Because
side.
believe it or not, police officers have been called
Oh, yeah.
to go catch a dog. So as have I, or a skunk.
Yep.
I believe we had a skunk that needed to be retrieved. Our police chief crawled in a garage and under a car to get a skunk. So
Yeah, no, I'm just looking at the other side of it, because
Yeah.
people do get irate when.
Yeah. That'll still, unfortunately, we like to minimize that as much as possible. Unfortunately, that'll still be a police matter.
Okay.
Yep, where
All right,
possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just
Good
doing
question.
CYA on us. So. All right, thank
Any
you.
other questions? All right, great. Great report. That was very thorough. Next item is the one we've all been waiting for. Discussion, update, and public comments on progress of Lafayette Street Waterline Replacement Project. So we're going to do this a little bit differently than we normally do. Normally, we don't have public comments during this, but we were talking about setting up kind of a different public hearing just to make sure that we're communicating with us. This is one of these opportunities to do things better. Brian, thank you for, I've got to tell you, this is the absolute epitome of how we need to act as a community. Brian had some concerns. He was personally impacted. He had some neighbors that were, so he reached out to us proactively. He talked to his city council person. He called me, and he was working with us as a part of the solution. He actually handed out, I'm sure that those of you that are here were because he went and handed these things out to make sure that we were communicating. This is a community coming together, dealing with an issue, and absolutely phenomenal. So I wanted to walk through, a lot of this has already been in here.
Do you want to go to the actual update?
Yeah. So let's get the update on where we are, where we expect it to be, and what we expect to see for the completion.
Okay.
So you want to walk through that?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to turn it over to John, and I want to recognize we got two folks from Rangeline here that are with the contractor that did the work. It's always a little nervous when you come to a public meeting about a project that people have some concerns over, but I think we do have a great community, and really this is about, one, understanding the goal of this discussion will be to understand what's left to do, and we think it's really close to getting wrapped up, and two, what we could have done better for the next project. And as we heard Mr. Griffin suggest certain things that I certainly made note of.
That's true. And then I spoke with Mr. Griffin as well, and Ms. Bippert. So I've gotten a little field dealings with some of the residents out there as well. And like he's mentioned, we have two of our contractors here for Rangeline that have been working with us on this project. And hopefully this is not the only project. Hopefully this is the start of many others that we can continue growing and continue doing to help our infrastructure. This project was kind of fast-paced, if you ask me, when you look at projects in a big sense. We started in August talking about this. I'll even back up even further. We started talking about this 3 years ago when water lines were having problems with Lafayette and having shutdowns and couldn't turn the water off. So we were losing. The
entire city
the whole
shutdowns,
city,
yes.
Yeah, the whole city. So we were talked about doing some inserter valves throughout the project. And then we went back and said, well, why don't we just do the whole line? So then here comes 2022 and brings us to this point, and then got us to where it was going to be open cut, and this was going to be an add alternate. Is my right, Phyllis? And then we decided, well, we haven't done a pipe bursting job we've done it on sewer, we haven't done one on water. So to help with messing with utilities and trying to avoid utilities, this was a good option for us to take on, and I thought it would be good to learn ourselves. I thought it went well. I think it's still going well. We're about 90 to 95% complete now.
And if I can, I'm sorry, I want to interrupt you really quickly because I wanted to just key in on something that you just had talked about. I think that some of us are very familiar with it, what that process was. A lot of the residents didn't understand that. So the first option was literally to dig a trench the entire way, dig it up. It would have been severely more impactful, and it would have been prolonged. It would have been a big mess, and I think it's great that you found a way to work around that. Costs less money, creates less disturbance to the residents. So basically what they did is inserted the line in there, and I think that, so the street crossings were because of the temporary lines to make sure that people still had water. And so, and I got to give the contractor kudos. Your guys were respectful and wonderful. They kept an eye out for my dog when I lost it. They didn't find it, we found it, but just great community involvement with that. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood this could have been a whole lot worse impact to your properties, impact to your lives, but the way that the contractor that John led this project with the contractors and with the plan, phenomenal job on the actual plan to reduce the cost, to reduce the impact on the people.
John, just for public knowledge, will you briefly explain the pipe bursting process?
Okay. It's where we have an existing pipe, and they have a piece of machine that actually they dig two pits or two holes, and they go and they increase the size the existing pipe and break that pipe that's in there, and they pull through a new pipe, which is what we have in the ground now.
Yeah.
And then they come back and make the connections.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. It's good, and it helps both ways. And like I said, not hitting some of the existing utilities that may or may not be there. Our records are kind of iffy.
We've been there before.
Yeah. Some of the stuff that was talked about. Do you want me to go through the questions and answers?
Yeah. I think let's just go through the report as you've got it.
Okay. Some of the questions that were asked were the yards and driveways that were disturbed. Are we going to go back in and redo what was there? Yes, we plan on going back there. And if it was an asphalt apron, we'll go back in there with asphalt apron. If it was a sidewalk, we'll go back in and redo the sidewalk if there was one there. We still plan on doing a lot of that stuff. I think today was our first walkthrough, a preliminary walkthrough, and we're still on the cleanup phases of this project. They're sweeping today. We did hear there was a lot of dust, so we need to work with the guys and getting some of that wet so that we wouldn't affect too many of the homes that are along that street as we do the cleanup. They're still doing some small, like the valve boxes, readjusting some of the valve boxes, so that's still happening right now. They're talking about the properties that are on the driveways or may even drainages. Are we going to go back and redo those? Yeah, we plan on going back if they were affected. We had one culvert, I think, that we had to go back and redo, and I saw that today. They went back and did a real good job on doing that. That was one where the cars were going through that open lot, and there was those big old trench ruts going through that, so it was a mess. When will the streets be opening? As soon as possible, because we had a meeting last Friday, and we're talking about that with them. Can we open the streets, some of the streets at least, to get in and out? They're going to try and work with us as far as opening the streets as much as possible, so that we can get traffic flowing back again. But at the same time, we want to make sure that they're safe and not have to worry about a car pulling up beside them when they can't hear or see some of these vehicles, and then one just comes right by us and and it might hit them or hit somebody else, or they might hit the car. So we're going to do that as soon as possible. Let's see.
So as soon as possible, what had we talked about, like? when-
I'm assuming a couple weeks?
So our status is, right now we're sweeping, and our end game goal is to have that whole stretch open by the time we leave this weekend. And then that way, as we come back and even make like section repairs, we might just, for safety concerns, shut off a section, like a block. But as for side streets, main access, we plan on having to measure them before we leave on Friday.
Great.
That's good. They're still got to do some mulching, I believe. Is that right? That's going to happen?
The hydro-mulching's going on Thursday.
Thursday, okay.
Can you explain the hydro-mulching also? Not everybody's familiar
For
with
some of the areas we took some of the grass away, that what grass was there. We're going to come back in there and hydro mulch.
So hydro-mulch, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a spray-on. They do it on the highways all the time. They spray it on, it grows from there.
Green stuff.
So replacing the grass.
Does erosion protection and seeding all at the same time.
That's all that I had. And as far as the pending items, I don't know if you all had any more to share.
I think you nailed it. Our goal, our end game goal is to be out, just to be safe, we're going to say second week of February. Our substantial completion was the end of February. Our goal is to try to be end of January. Try to come out in a month ahead of time.
Great.
We did have lessons learned, though, that like I was mentioning, we had low water pressure in some areas. That we had valves that we thought that would be able to shut some of the system off right there, and then the wells, some of them didn't shut off. And then we had to go further along and find a valve that was actually serving the other side of the city. Well, it put a damper on that side of the city, which this side of the highway. So there are some lessons learned that we found out about, that we want to get prepared for the next project. Another one was coordinated with waste management. You mentioned Devin taking over that waste management. Well, that was right about the time that we were making that switch over. So that was a kind of a little mess up that we could have gotten better. Some folks were not getting their trash. Could have gotten their trash a lot sooner, or even the recycle. We're having to make efforts to go and get them serviced where they should have been serviced. The U.S. Postal Service is another one. They're not getting their mail. They're missing some of that. Of course, the traffic going through was a big one. We're going to look at that better this time, hopefully, for the next project, that we won't have some of those total shutdowns. That we could have probably done a little bit better on that too. And I'm sure there's others, but those are some of the others that I wrote down for this particular project.
Great. I did want to call out one of the things that we discussed. He mentioned that the things that were happening in the apron, which are basically in the right-of-way, the city does not have responsibility to do that. If you build something in the right-of-way, legally, that is your responsibility to take care of. And as Scott and John worked through this, he said this is the neighborly thing to do. This is something that we can do good in a small town. The expense isn't incredible, and it's just a good way to take care of the city. So that was one thing. The note on the communication, and this is something across the board we are getting better at, for sure. I think that the Country Village was a perfect example of that, how we communicated with streets, with the people that were going to be impacted by that. So I think this is a great opportunity for when we have especially wider scale outages. And I'll tell you, the notifications that I've seen come out from Public Works have been phenomenal. Like every time, like people know what to expect. When things happen, you react to it quickly, even in off hours. So across the board, I think that Public Works has upped their game. This, I do believe, was a pretty big miss. There was a miss on the part of council as well. It's a great opportunity to take the impact of this and better communicate with people. We need to put up things like, another good example of this is when we did tree trimming down Lower Lacoste, putting a sign at the beginning of it, like 2 days before, saying if we have to shut down, it's going to happen 2 days from now. And then when we put it out, so that people don't drive all the way down there to Constantinople or trying to get to Constantinople, or even worse, going the other way, if we put up signage for that. So I think putting up signage in advance on that signage, letting them know what to expect, what kind of timeframes. These are just things that will continue to, will make mistakes, hopefully just once. And I think that the preparation after the Snowmageddon was a perfect example of this, and you've shown really well that you take these lessons learned to heart. So I appreciate you.
Another big test was going to be the River Bluff when we start that one. So that one's going to get fun.
Hopefully we learn from these. Well, and the plan that you've already got put together for that has that proactive communication. So as long as we continue to learn from that, which you obviously have, so I think that's good. So I'm going to open this up to council for questions or comments, and then I want to hear from citizens to see if we have missed anything, if you have anything additional to say. Let's do it like that. So can I start with council?
I know drainage has been a big thing on our mind and everything too with the Lafayette. Did they correct any drainage issues on Lafayette when they were, no?
No, this was purely a water project, so
I
the
didn't know if
drainage
they were
issues that
hampered.
existed, and we didn't, like, we'll reestablish the bar ditches if they're disturbed, they'll be put back the way they were, but that's not, yeah, that wasn't part of the scope.
That was my big concern.
Now, when
to
we
make
do the
sure that we had-
streets, when we come back and do Lafayette, if there's an opportunity to do some drainage improvement, it'll be done at that time. And that should be, I think I addressed that, potentially this summer or this fall.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't have any questions, thank you.
Related to Sheena's questions, though, Devin, you all kind of cleaned up Lafayette Street earlier, didn't you, with drainage issues and the reopening some of the bar ditches?
That was mostly related to Constantinople and some of those, just what we could improve.
Getting Lafayette into Constantinople and Athens and things like that.
I think there were some minor improvements made at some of those intersections.
Right.
Those corner lots.
Signage, did K-Freeze come up with the signage related to the comment earlier? Did they have the signage plan on that, or did the contract?
We reviewed it, or K-Freeze reviewed their signage plan.
So that's something to pencil in for next time. I like your suggestion that you put, if we're going to ever close down Constantinople, put the signs up at 90 and
All the way to the other end, yeah.
we have at least one there,
More
so
than
Constantinople is.
And not low to the ground someplace.
Yeah, that's great.
Not behind a tree?
Well, low to the ground where, people see, oh, it must be a for sale sign.
Councilman Stein? I don't have any. Subject taken. Councilman Dyer?
The only thing I'd like to say is the majority of the project is in District 5, with the exception of Mr. Griffin and Mr. Bippert. The rest of the people are impacted are in my district. You're welcome to call me, email me, if you're having a particular issue that you're not getting satisfactory response, and I'll contact the city and try to work with them to try to get your problem resolved.
Thank you. All right, so citizens, if you don't mind, if you come up to talk, if you want to ask questions, if you want to make comments, just state your name and address, and let's have a conversation. So, Brian, did you have more that you wanted to say on there? I know I cut you off earlier.
If no one else, Mike, go ahead.
I'll be brief. My name is Domingo Perales. I live at 1016 Algiers. Throughout the last few years, we've had multiple issues with water, breaking lines and digging out my yard in the same place all the time. We try to grow grass there, cut it. Next thing you know, they're digging a big old trench there. And it's very inconvenient because when they cover it up, they leave all kinds of big rocks, and it just makes it very difficult to cut the grass and keep it down. And I don't want to get a ticket from the ordinance lady to come by and give me a ticket for not cutting my grass because the boulders left, from them not cleaning up their mess. And I've been trying to build a fence around my yard, and if I would have built one there, I would have to tear it down a few times with all the digging that goes all the way into my yard. So that's a hassle. And they did open the barricades right there. I live on Lafayette and Algiers. And as soon as I got home today, I saw them opening up on my way over here, they're opening up the barricades. I found that kind of coincidental, but, and I don't know if the contractor's going to take care of, I don't know if you're familiar with my house. They have a plumbing issue where the plumbing goes uphill before it goes into the main sewer? Because I actually got home one day and they were trying to cover it up, and I went out there with a level and my sewer was going uphill over the water line, and I've been having problems with my drainage from my sewer ever since I put the new pipe there. And it's uncovered right now, and it's not, the barricades I use there is unacceptable for residential area. Y'all need some kind of netting or something, about 4.5 foot deep. I don't have any kids, but there's kids around. Ride bikes, there's deer, animals, pets, easily fall in there. Caution tape, that's unacceptable. You need to put something way better than that. And so right now it's basically open for anyone to go in there. So yeah, so are we going to answer any of these questions, or we're just making comments and we don't get any answers today?
So the questions are specifically about
the plumbing issues I have.
Okay. And if you can work with John on that?
Okay, I spoke to the contractor on site, and they even had pictures of the level, and the guys holding the level, I think it was one of these guys, I think it was maybe you or someone else, and you can obviously see what's going uphill.
Right. And that would be a public works thing, so.
And they said they were going to repair it, so maybe that's why it's still open, and there's about 2 tons of dirt in my yard right now, and they just dumped more coming from somewhere else. I'm not a storage facility for the city, it's on my yard. If it's on my yard, then I could take it and use it somewhere else in my yard, or what's the deal with that?
Probably not a good idea. I mean, this is something that, this is always disruptive, and there's always impact to us. What's that?
It's a constant thing, though.
A constant thing. I don't think that
The digging in my yard, over the years, it's constant.
Okay.
And I can only all y'all's rules all these years, tearing down buildings that were, y'all made me tear down buildings. I followed y'all's rules, pay y'all's permit fees to do things, pay y'all's taxes. Y'all can't use my yard for a storage facility for y'all's 2 tons of dirt that y'all have there. I need to find somewhere else for it, or spread it out, or something.
Well, so what they had spoken to was that they will return everything back to its original state.
And I don't know if it's in your yard. Is it in your yard, or is it in our right-of-way?
Yeah, there's the big old trench there, there's a big old pile of dirt, and they trenched about 8 foot into my yard where my sewer line goes, because they said they were going to fix the sewer line to go under the water line instead of over it.
I'll definitely have someone like that. We'll reach out to you. Can you give me your phone number? Or do you want to if you want to leave it for me, that we don't, not on the video.
Yeah, I'll give it to you afterwards.
Sorry, did you have something on there?
Yes, sir. I'll speak on that. That's something that whenever we pipe burst, the existing sewer line was sitting on the water main, and I got with Jeremiah from Public Works, and that's the reason they dug back so far is because I guess whenever your sewer line was installed, it wasn't installed correctly, so they had to go further back in order to get under the water line and do it the correct way, because beforehand it was not done correct, and it was just sitting on top of the water line. And the dirt there is for that hole whenever it...
No, it came from somewhere else too. It's not, that dirt didn't come from just that hole. I had someone witness y'all pile the dirt there from somewhere else. But y'all say y'all leave it on Friday, and so it's going to be done by Friday, repaired by Friday?
I know the city came out today and started working on it. I don't know the status of it right now.
Yeah, I'll have to give you a separate answer, because it sounds like that's not a water line project, it's a sewer project. So I'll have to find out why that is.
But it's caused by the water line issue.
Understood.
Can we get it barricaded though, like immediately?
Understood.
Yeah, that's a safety thing for sure.
Okay, appreciate it.
So what was your name?
Domingo Perales, 1016 Algiers.
So did that answer, were there any other questions that you had?
No, sir.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. All right, any other questions, comments?
I'll just make my stuff to wrap up real brief. One of the requirements that I'm going to need to have is, just like Mr. Perales, I had dirt put onto my property. Y'all done a pretty good job of getting most of it back. It still probably has about 3 to 4 inches of overburden on the original grade. If I could get y'all to come back and pull that back away, that would be helpful. The Bipperts, there's Dave and Nancy. Would you like me to just kind of go over y'all? Okay. David and Nancy live across the street from me. They actually have a section of sidewalk that runs down Naples and across Lafayette. Both of those sections of sidewalk had to be cut for one reason or another, either by the city or by the contractor. I think the Naples side was the contractor, and on the Lafayette side had to be the city. And that was taken out. It will probably at some point need to be replaced, probably before the paving is redone. There is a large amount of sediment that got blown out of where the valve ruptured on Naples probably, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, because it was pushing dirt up out of the hole with the water and running down Lafayette to the drainage area. There's probably, 2 or 3 inches worth of sediment along their side of the street that needs to be removed. I know the project kind of started at Naples and went westward. My house, of course, is on that eastern side of the intersection. That section of street, I know y'all were sweeping today. If we could get that half block east of the intersection done and swept up, it is, if we ever do get another rainstorm, it gets really sloppy coming out of my driveway and in front of David and Nancy's house. So if we could get that taken care of. And I don't see Daniel here. Okay. Daniel and Amanda Sova, they're on the opposite intersection. They're actually in District 5. They actually had a situation where I think having to push across one of the lines across the street, the skid loader actually went halfway across Daniel's yard, and you can see 2 very large skid steer tracks. If you've ever been by Daniel's house, you know he is very prideful of his lawn. And now he has 2 very large skid steer tracks just right through the middle of it. So he's very upset about it. He asked me if he wasn't here to kind of mention that. So if there's something, since it is on private property, I know y'all will have to
Do you have
go
that
in there.
address, John?
He is not
Do you know
at
the-
all.
Real quick, just, do you know the address of the location we're talking about?
It's the corner house. What is
803 Lafayette.
803 Lafayette.
Could be 803.
Yeah, he just looked it up.
I'm looking at it.
Okay. And it won't, hydromulch is not going to be acceptable because of what he's planted in there and taken care of and cultivated over the last 2 years. He's not going to want hydromulch sprayed on it. So just so y'all are aware of that. But those were the only other problems that I had personally. So if we can get those taken care of during the final walkthrough, that would be great.
And John, so if any other issues arise, we're not going to have a council meeting to talk about it probably.
Right.
So should they contact you or should they contact the inspector?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
And John's been responsive.
yeah. I just want to make it clear. So we've got a list of the action items, the punch list of issues. But if any other issues occur, or anything else comes up, and you have a concern, please contact John Gomez at our Public Works number 830. I don't know. I never remember. Anyway,
Yeah,
it's on the website.
And it may be helpful if you can just put a little blurb on the city's website, for those other homeowners, because there were at least 3 other homeowners who had issues with either their apron, their parking, spot, or their apron going into their driveway because of the expansion of the pipe going underneath the driveway. It either bulged it up or made it too difficult for them to get their cars over. So there's at least 3 of other ones. I didn't get the addresses on those, and I don't see the familiar faces, but I don't think they're here. So you may want to individually, as you do your walkthrough, you probably want to check with that. So thank you for your work on this.
Thanks.
I appreciate the time that the council took to basically listen to the complaints and then put together the white paper, which we handed out. I think that made a big impression on the citizens that I talked to during my walk up Lafayette. And so, again, if you can kind of get that blueprint refined as y'all move through the city, because I even talked to people who were south of me, and they were like, well, I'm not really affected, but, it's like I told them, I said, someday you may be. So, as we improve on our infrastructure, all parts of the cities are going to be touched. And they were like, oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
But we appreciate y'all's work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
The contractors are so polite. I've never seen the politeness out of the young people. What I said was, he must be 12 12 and I'm really old. Know me, I'm just saying, I know me, and is there anything you can do to help you? Are you okay? You know, especially Christmas and Thanksgiving, they were wonderful. And you also were wonderful about coming and trying to help me. So I've got your number. Thank you very much. And thank you for the news for me. I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
And the good news in all of this is this council has been so proactive, working with city staff on making a lot of things happen. So we are doing a lot of stuff. We're making a lot of repairs. We're making a lot of, we're making up a lot of time that has not been invested in the past. So we are going to have some of these growing pains, but again, the good news is this council has done a phenomenal job of looking after the city. So hopefully we continue to do better. Thank you for coming down for that. Is there anybody else before we close this item? Great. Thank you for your involvement again. Please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, next item is a presentation of possible action on stormwater master plan.
And for that, I've got AB with our K. Freeze and Associates. This is something that started almost a year ago. A year ago? I don't know. Yeah, almost a year ago.
January. You might be a couple months behind, but
so it is. Well, first thing, if you look at the report, I don't remember how many pages it is, but yeah, it's a big one, 170 pages, something like that. It's a very thorough report. AB is not going to go over the entire report tonight. You're welcome. We'll probably just focus on the projects that were identified, the costs of the projects, and maybe the recommendations. You've got a couple of pages. We haven't had a chance to talk about this, so he's receiving this instruction in real time. But I noticed as I went through the report, they provided some very helpful direction for staff on here's some things you can do locally as far as, you know, as Councilman King mentioned, minor improvements. They won't make a huge difference, but as far as actually solving our flood issues, but every little bit helps. And to that extent, I think they were very thorough in providing every tip or advice that they could. And so even on the small stuff, we've got some advice there. And then again, they did look at a list of programs. So I'm sure you probably have some thoughts that you wanted to share. Sure. Take it away, and
Well, thank you.
I'll cut you off with a.
I'm A.B. Salinas with K-Freeze, and my plan today was just kind of walk you really quickly through the report to give you a sense of the organization of what it is that we're presenting. Spend more of the time focusing on some of the recommendations and kind of that path forward. This plan ultimately, it's kind of a bird's eye view of developing a plan for how we're going to approach drainage issues within the city. And then moving forward, I think it's a continued conversation through workshops and meeting with staff and talking through what are the things that we're going to prioritize and how we're going to fund it, and then what are the next steps to do that.
So I have your report up. If you tell me what page you're going to go to, I will flip to that page.
Okay. You can kind of just lightly scan through, and it begins with just kind of an introduction of the different things that we looked at specifically within the report. So we start with an existing conditions understanding of what's going on out there. So we pull planet metrics, imagery, we go out in the field, we try to identify all the storm drain infrastructure that's within the community, map that out into our GIS system, and that becomes the basis for when we go into doing some modeling and analysis and then coming up with solutions. That's what we base it off of. The other thing that we looked at was the floodplain maps. Those are issued by FEMA. Those help understand risk for the community, and it's something that represents the flood insurance program. And so those maps become very important of understanding where your house is in relation to the floodplain. And then there's a lot of other flooding that occurs within the community that's not mapped by FEMA. These are smaller watersheds. So what we did is we looked at what we call the hydraulic rapid assessment. So we did a two-dimensional model. Essentially, we take rainfall, we simulate an event over the terrain, over the city, and then it kind of tells us where some of the flood issues are. We went through a number of community workshops. Many in this room were a part of that, and we kind of calibrated where we were in terms of if we saw an issue here, got some feedback and confirmed that what we were showing was representative of the risk. And then we start to develop some capital projects, and then other things that we start to look at is moving forward, what do you need to consider or as potential planning considerations from a policy perspective? What do you need to be on the lookout for with respect to what's occurring in the county and how that relates to the city? And then some operations and maintenance considerations. One of the things that we discussed a lot in our community feedback meetings was that the city largely had a bunch of bar dishes that helped convey runoff throughout the different neighborhoods, and over time those ditches have since been filled in and nearly non-existent. So how do we kind of approach that issue as well? And then provided some suggestions, some ideas for funding recommendations. And funding is something that is a continued conversation every year. So every year we need to look at, these are the available grants and loans that may be out there. Now that we have this list of capital projects and ideas for policy and planning, that it helps inform which grants we might pursue and how competitive we might be at those pursuits. All right, so...
Do you have your own presentation? Did you want to go through that, or?
I don't.
Okay.
So we're just going to run through the report, and I'm going to keep it really, really
No, you're good. Okay.
fast as possible. But if you could jump up to page 5, I'll just...
Back to page 5? Wait, whoops. Okay. That is,
Major storm drain network.
103 in my packet.
I'm thinking, that's why.
95.
Yeah.
103 in my packet.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'm moving at a reasonable pace.
Yeah,
Are
go
we
down.
getting there?
Go down.
Down 4.
It'd be page 5 on that.
Okay.
2, 3's got 4's got 5.
Right there.
Okay, there we go. So, as we mentioned earlier, we started with the existing conditions analysis. This was, we went out in the field, we inventoried where we can locate storm drains, inlets, culverts, different structures, and map that out. And so that's just an illustration of where those storm drain pipes are within the city. This is focused on the main part of the city, but we have some maps that accompany the report that are larger exhibits that you can also reference.
The thing to note is there's not very many.
Right. So that becomes a challenge when we start to look at, and we'll get into some of the capital projects. And
Well, that also, it kind of conveys that the original design of the city was not to have a bunch of subterraneous storm drain. It was the streets themselves served as the storm conveyance, which is a problem now. Anyway.
Right. And so moving on to the next page, we start to discuss the floodplain, the FEMA maps, or the major streams within the community. The ones that we were focused on was the Medina River, Kemp Creek, and Flat Creek. The Medina is pretty well studied, and it's based off of gauge data, so the information is a lot more accurate and representative of the risk that we have right now with the floodplain maps. Flat Creek and Kemp Creek, particularly Flat Creek, had a lot more significant changes when we did our kind of a preliminary review of the models, and kind of we saw an expanded floodplain. So if you go to the next page, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, but
Really go to this page?
yeah, this is basically a summary of what the data, the models are based off of. So you look at Flat Creek and you look at Kemp Creek, the date that the studies were performed were in 1978. So a lot has changed. And
First year of FEMA production.
excuse me?
First year of FEMA's map production.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
44 years.
And the county is going through some remapping efforts, and I think that's something we need to collaborate with and kind of see where they are on things. But we went ahead and we did just a really high level updated model to see what that change in risk might be based off of the latest rainfall data. So there's new precipitation statistical information that the NOAA had come out with, and so we ran those numbers, and we have some accompanying exhibits in our report that show that. And then kind of moving on to the report, to section 5, yeah. So this is an interesting exhibit in that it shows in yellow these boundaries. Those are drainage areas or watersheds. A lot of the contributing area that drains towards the city is coming from the north. A lot of that coming within outside of
see these arrows, right?
the city's jurisdictional boundaries. And as you see, and today as I was driving over here, I mean, traffic is wild, and development is coming, right? And there's subdivisions that are planned in this part of the watershed, and as that gets developed, there's the risk of increased runoff that's generated from those developments and coming down.
This is Petrenko Road right up here, is it not? Is that
hard to
Petrenko? See? I can see subdivisions, you know, a subdivision up there.
Petrenko, or, yeah.
That's what makes me think about it. So when you talk about, you know, development up in the north, and you look at these watersheds and how they come down and affect us, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You know, here we are
Little sister's home.
in Little Castroville, but all this development up here is going to exacerbate the water issue, the watershed issue that heads towards Castroville.
Right, and then there's, as development occurs and encroaches towards the city, there'll be development that's, let's say, just next to your city limit boundary, and the conversation will be, okay, well, now let's annex this subdivision, and maybe it was developed through the county standards, and so now it becomes the responsibility of the city to figure out now that there's an issue. And so there's an opportunity from a policy and a planning perspective of engaging with the county and talking about opportunities to discuss these and see what it is that can be done. So sometimes you can form an interlocal agreement with the county where when a development occurs in a certain, you know, within the ETJ or some boundary, that it's sent to the city for review as well and comments. And so at least there's an opportunity for that discussion and feedback to happen.
Yeah, the ETJ doesn't reach anywhere near the boundaries of that.
It does
so that would
not,
be a
no.
significant ask, but
And then
bad
move
idea.
a little bit further into the report on the next page, I believe. We have another exhibit.
You talking about this one?
Nope, just down.
This one?
Yeah, that's it.
That's the next one.
Right. So we had done some localized flood analysis, and we identified hotspot areas. We'd had some public meetings, and then we came up with these 10 areas that we were going to focus on of trying to figure out project solutions for. I mean, we identified more than that, but we focused on 10. And the other ones that we maybe didn't include was because they were smaller in scope, or they didn't really seem to impact property or public safety, so they kind of fell into a lower priority. But these are kind of generally the 10 that we focused on. The ones in red, we did a little bit more homework on and try to come up with a bit of a better solution with some more detailed analysis. And then in the green were kind of some more simple, straightforward issues, and we just kind of developed some kind of back of the napkin concepts and cost estimates to help support that. And then moving a little bit further in the report, we go through, and this will take a lot longer to discuss than in this meeting, but we basically prioritized it off of different ranking criteria, namely public safety. So there's a number of different things. If you have more homes that are impacted with flooding, or if there's, this is the only way in and out of a neighborhood, and that roadway is overtopped during a flood event, impacting emergency access, things like that, those fell up into higher priorities. But then we also took into account economic criteria. So if the project was very expensive, then it would not be as scoring as high, just because it becomes a much more difficult project to implement. So if we just didn't take that into consideration, then all the most expensive projects would probably rise to the top. And so Kind of went through this whole process of scoring and ranking, and then if we go down a little bit further to page 13.
Could you stop on page 13?
Yeah.
on Table
Yes.
6? Because, I mean, instead of going through the report and talking all the technical details, this little chart right here says what we need to see. We can't afford to fix all these things. You look at the cost, Athens Street, $20 million. So we're not going to be fixing these things next week. So it's important for us to know we have a real good explanation, a real good study that tells us why we're flooding. We already know where we flood, and now we know why. And we know we don't have the money to do these projects in a timely fashion. We've got bonds coming in the future. Maybe we'll get to them. What I'd like to hear is discussion about what can we do in the near term, because we can't do
Right, and that's what he's getting into.
all of these things. So instead of going through the report and explaining the technical details of why we flood, could we focus on what can we do in the next year or two to help the places that we know are going to flood if we have an 8-inch rain, like Athens?
We're getting there. So, and this, all of this information.
It's great.
This is really helpful in setting up the basis of it, but let's let him finish it out. And then part of what we're going to be talking about during the CIP, I mean, if you look at this, to put it in perspective, this is about $90 million worth of work, and we have less than $1 million in our drainage reserve, and our entire general fund is $4 million a year. So we can't go borrow.
We're not going to build these projects in the next 20 years.
We have to find creative solutions for this. So we'll work through the strategy on that as we move forward. So if you don't mind.
Sure. So with all that said, we came up with a ranking of these 10 projects in this order. This is not gospel, so to speak. Doesn't mean that you have to execute project rank 1 first and then knock it off in that order. There'll be different opportunities that arise that make sense to prioritize one over the other. But this begins at least the basis point of identifying which ones may be tackled first. Then we have some project costs that are associated with them. And I am getting to the point of kind of some of the things that we can do in the short term. But let me just move a little bit further and just kind of run through what we have in the report.
Can I ask for a point of clarification? I think that in looking at the report, it looks like what we had talked about at Naples, leveraging the drainage under Highway 90 as basically an underpass. That cost is not in here, right? This is strictly what it costs to do the drainage for the size that it is.
Surface drainage.
Right.
Okay, perfect. All right, just wanted to make sure.
Is this $22 million cost?
No, that would have been the Lorenzo, that's $11,647,000.
I guess it could be part of the Lorenzo cost.
So
But those
$1 million is a conveyance that conveys water, not people.
Water, yeah.
They're engineers, they fudge a lot. They sandbag like hell. But that's what they're paid to do. We're glad that it's a conservative report. We'll see when we actually get it bid out.
It's a challenging job to know where rain is going.
Yeah.
And how that's going to, there's a lot of things that get impacted, utilities and roads and so forth. But a little bit going further along, and I'm trying to move this as quickly as possible. We talked a little bit about some strategies on regional planning efforts, so, you know, possibly having different requirements like mandatory detention, or maybe some guidance on easements or finished floor elevations for new structures, guidance on developing some more stormwater design criteria, or having that be a little bit more focused. As you have more development in the community, it's important to have that kind of criteria in place so that you get the construction and the results that you're looking for. I won't cover all this too much, and I
want to be clear. So, believe it or not, as a city that lives bounded on 3 sides by a river, we really don't have stormwater method. You know, we have the International Building Code, which establishes some minimal amount of standards as far as floor heights and that kind of thing, but it's not comprehensive, and it's certainly not hasn't been customized to Castroville. And when you think about Castroville's position and where we are, that's definitely something that's lacking. It's something we really could use in a building code, even though we're at 90% built out in our historic city. There's still infill lots. There's still things that get rebuilt, get torn down and rebuilt, and we need to have those standards. And so that's one of the recommendations that you've made.
Right, and I would say that's probably one of the most effective things and easiest things to do, is if you can create that document, that criteria that allows developers to understand, you know, what are the boundary lines for development. You get the development that you're looking for within your community, and the hope is that, the expectation is that what gets built will have no adverse impacts on the neighboring properties. You know, once something gets built, to go and fix it, as you can see, it's extremely, you know, cost prohibitive. So we try to get ahead of that.
What's pretty remarkable is we go back to, you think about that illustration you showed where it showed the subterraneous stormwater systems that are in place. There's just a couple. There's literally like 3 in the entire city. So the streets are the conveyance method, and despite the fact that the streets are the conveyance method for stormwater and have been since those houses were originally built and the streets were originally put in place, many of the finished floor heights are at or below the street height.
Right.
They're even with it. Well, that it doesn't take. I mean, it's not hard to understand. Well, yeah, your house is going to flood
Because the original street houses were dirt.
Yes,
And now
we built some of them up. So yeah, that type of thing has happened, and there were some bar ditches in place. Those have gone away. So they're contributing factors, but it's still it's pretty eye-opening to realize that there are some of those things that just nobody thought of in the past, and now just one house at a time or 2 houses at a time, the community changes and it creates pretty considerable issues.
Right.
All these years later.
I've seen a number of communities where subdivision was platted, lots right over where the major creeks were, they filled in the creeks, and surprise, that's a problem years later. So, I mean, they just didn't have the tools, I think, that we have now with respect to modeling and understanding these simulations of rainfall events, and then an appreciation of just how much development has occurred compared from then to now. So we have some guidance here on different sign criteria and policy. I won't go through all this, but these are kind of just some best practices for different different hydrology and hydraulic stuff. And then going to where we can do, what we can do now, maybe some of that low hanging fruit that Councilman Dyer is talking about is on the sides of operation and maintenance. So we tried to develop just a little bit of an idea of what that plan might look like in terms of how do we approach creating or restoring some of the bar ditch systems that are on the streets. And so we outlined some recommended maintenance activities that go with that. I would skip over to page 22. So we inventoried, yeah, and this is a pretty representative, I think, picture of the street conditions where we're talking about houses with their finished floor elevations pretty near grade. There's not a lot of relief here. It's all flat. You see that there's maybe some existence of a bar ditch, but hardly any, and not enough to really convey a major storm event. And so those are challenges, and part of what is tricky with this roadside maintenance and ditches is you have to be careful where you begin the process of restoring these ditches. You want to start from downstream of the system to upstream. It's tempting and it's easy to say, let's go and let's restore the ditches here, but then as you follow it, it's got to drain somewhere. And without that connection all the way downstream, it very likely creates an adverse impact to somebody else. So we solve the problem here, we create another problem somewhere else. And so we tried to provide some guidance on what would be maybe some best practices for, as we identify streets that we're going to prioritize for restoration of the ditches, how that might occur, So if you go down a little bit further, this is an example of a ditch that's kind of filled in on the left, it's deteriorated, and then on the right it's restored. But it's a pretty sizable ditch that you're seeing there. And then if you have flat grades, those ditches are probably not going to have a slope. They're going to probably be flat bottoms in terms of, it's going to have some ponding. Otherwise, you could have some really wide ditches. So there's a lot of considerations that need to go into it. I think that's something we can tackle. We can explore more with Devin and with Scott and kind of see how we might tackle that. But that would be something that is probably more immediately tangible and implementable in certain areas of the community. And then moving on, I'll wrap it up with kind of, we just looked at some funding recommendations. I think, as you all are familiar, there's only a number of pots to draw from. There's the stormwater utility fee. That could be, often it's for maintenance type projects because it rarely covers to the extent of capital infrastructure. There's your general fund, which is largely property tax driven or sales tax. That's always got a lot of competing interests every year with the budget, so that's a hard one to have sustained funding for drainage. You can do bond programs on some cycles. There's grants. Those are the big opportunity to try to focus on. Of course, there's low interest loans. Whenever there is a major flood event in a part of the state or a community, there's disaster recovery funding that goes with that. So whenever there's a declaration of a disaster, you've got to jump on that. This would, I think, help towards that. So then I also have in here a table of all the different, a whole list of different grant programs out there, highlighted in green some of the ones that seem to be most relevant to kind of what we're doing here and what may be eligible. So we've talked about the state flood plan in the past. This is a new one, so we're still learning about that. They're working through the process. There's no legislative action so far.
I'm going to break in real quick. So one of the things that was very fortuitous is the city engaged in this process just before the state started announcing its efforts to do a statewide flood control program. So we were already, planning to do the study. Had already had conversations with you all. You'd already allocated money for the study, and then lo and behold, the state announces that they're doing it. So the timing of this really was serendipitous. It could not have been better. We don't know what will come of that, but very much like the airport master planning, there is every real potential that some of these larger projects that we think, oh my God, how are you ever going to pay for that? There's a potential. There's a very real potential that we may be able to partner with the state and get some of these major flood concerns taken care of. I wish I could promise that will be the case, but the fact is it's a real possibility. So we've put ourselves in an excellent position to compete, because when they announce that funding, it will be competitive, and there won't be very many communities, if any at all, that have a flood plan that is as new and updated as ours is. So ours will be very competitive, I would expect.
We hope so. So I'll wrap it up with that. I felt I was probably long-winded, but hopefully it was concise enough. So any questions?
So then, Scott, can we follow this up with what we had talked about in the original discussion, included more public hearings about this? As we start walking through this, I want to make sure that we are doing it not just during council meetings, but announcing it, like, I guess we could do it kind of like what we did with the Lafayette water line replacement. But what does that process look like for identifying the ones that we can do right now, identifying the sources of funding, expressing, like giving options for how we prioritize that?
Well, at this stage, this is very much like a water and sewer master plan, which we also are in the process of developing. Our engineer and staff are going to make some recommendations to council and try to also figure out how to fund those recommendations, so we're not just bringing you something that you can't afford, but try to figure out how to pay for it and what to do and in what order to do it in. It's not the public. Not to say there's not a room for public comment, but the public comment portion was the development of the plan. Now that the plan has been developed, it really comes, the prioritization of what gets done is going to be done, we're going to make professional recommendations, and then you all are going to decide what gets done. And you should be talking to your constituents, et cetera, and if it's appropriate to do a public meeting at some point because, okay, well, now we've selected it, and here's how we're paying for it, and this is the impact to you, citizen, absolutely, I think a public meeting would be appropriate. Part of the timing of this, just also as a reminder to the council, we have 20 years ago, the city embarked on some flood mitigation efforts. Unfortunately, very little maintenance has been done on those projects. So there's some outfall areas that are on the north side of the city that fall into the river on that side, and there's some pretty significant failures that are related to those. I'm sure there's pictures of those in the report, I would expect.
Probably some pictures somewhere.
I didn't go through the entire appendix, but I imagine they're in the appendix. So we timed this because that 20 years ago, they funded that with a bond. That bond is falling off in 2023. Unfortunately, in talking to Samco and our bond council, the amount of money we're collecting every year from our constituents, from our residents, is not enough to issue a ton of debt. I think it's somewhere around maybe $2 million, $2.5 million. So there's without changing anything and continuing to collect the same amount we have been collecting and then collecting it for another 20 years, we could go borrow a couple $1 million and do a couple $1 million worth of work. That's not very promising. And I don't think it's realistic to say, okay, well, we're going to have the citizens pay 2 or 3 times what they're paying today. We have people living on fixed incomes, et cetera. It's just not realistic. So it's the difficult position that the staff is going to be in is trying to figure out, okay, how do we fund these? And I'm going to go back to partnerships with USACE. So Thursday of this week, I believe, already have a call. This will be the 3rd call with the Army Corps of Engineers. That was an effort that came out of the visit that the mayor and I had to Washington, D.C., where we went and met with some of these individuals and did follow-up meetings afterwards. So this USACE effort is part of that. They're also we're also talking to them about our wastewater treatment plant issue, where we have the ponds. That's a $4 million unfunded issue as well. So I think there's going to be an opportunity for some federal partnership, but at the end of the day, staff is going to work with the engineer to try to put together a workable plan to address what we think can be addressed from this plan.
Yeah, because you could engage with the Air National Guard for their reserve time to come in and help out too, to get them on orders. We would pay for their travel and their housing and their food. And they would come here.
But that's just labor, basically? Or
They come in, we get the materials or whatever they need, they do all the work. It's fabulous. Something to look into.
Air National Guard. Okay.
Yep.
So one thing to note, we're in number 11, we are going to be talking about our strategic priorities. And so it sounds like what we're talking about is including this and ranking this in the rest of the strategic priorities to determine how much staff time will be dedicated to this, how much time we'll spend during council meetings. So I think that to Herb's question from me, Councilman Dyer's question from before, we don't have, this is not an answer, this is an update. This is the report. From here, we develop the plan, we prioritize it, we begin to implement it. It's a slow process, but it's a necessary process. You had a question?
I've got a question on ARPA funds. The 750,000, I think the 2 times we got it. Can those funds be used to build bar ditches? Because it looks like the only solution we can do in the near term is bar ditches.
They can be used for drainage improvements. I have to find out whether that limits it to bar ditches or not, but I believe so. The short answer is I believe so. They can be used for water and sewer projects, and I believe drainage projects as well.
So part of that, though, let's be clear, we need to follow the plan that we got here, not go off. If we go and do some bar ditches that are not on this plan, then we're just going to change the plan. We'll have to go
Mr.
back
Mayor,
to it.
we got a plan that's 20 years in the future. Unless somebody comes in with, the federal government comes in with hundreds of millions of dollars, we need something we can do ourselves to take care of the things that we know are going to exist, and they repeat. And this is a great study. I don't mean to sound like I'm demeaning what you did. That's not my intent. It's a good report. But my focus is on what can the city do like at Athens Street. We know what's going to happen when we get an 8-inch rain. And the problem is getting the water from the top of the hill to the river. And the pictures you showed and the strategy you explained for well-engineered bar ditches looks like something that can be done not for millions of dollars, but for significantly less. And I'd like to focus in those upcoming meetings on what can we do in the near term that'll get us a little bit better on the major places, and then proceed with all the things that you've laid out to try to get grants and other things for the big projects, because we're not going to be able to afford those big
Well,
ones.
the irony is, it may be cheaper to buy a house that's flooding every time it rains than to try and fix the problem that's causing the flooding. I know that sounds silly,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
when you look at these numbers, it's like, well, wait a minute, how many houses are actually impacted? How many houses actually have a river running through them? Well, very few, actually.
Let's
I mean,
go over on Athens Street,
Right.
and I'll introduce you to a lot of people who can tell you how many times they've had to rebuild their house.
Right.
And
but the
bar
fact is
ditches might help us to procreate, you know.
Well, so that's going to be our job, is to bring forward in the CIP, here's the projects we would recommend, here's how we would recommend you fund them, whether it's with ARPA funds or some other means, and this is what we think is achievable in the near term. So I understand that's what you're wanting, and we will get that to you. This was not that, this is really just review of the plan, but the next step, and I think you already know this about, kind of me and our staff, is we don't like adopting plans and then just watch it, just let them sit on the shelf. My very real goal as your city administrator is to help the city fulfill plans. Plans without funding are dreams, right? So we've got to find a way, that's a quote from our mayor, we've got to find a way to actually fund the plan and implement it. And that'll be the challenge that we're ready to undertake, so.
And we'll talk about that as we go through the prioritization, because we have a lot of things that are facing us. We have a lot of planning efforts. And the most important is not the one that's in front of us right now, always. We have to be very methodical about this, look at it as a whole, because staff has a limited time. They spend a lot of time trying to achieve these things, and so we can't prioritize because it's something that we're talking about today over what we've already prioritized higher because of the overall needs. So we absolutely have to deal with drainage. We absolutely have to deal with a lot of other issues, but that will go through the planning process. We began that planning process a couple of years ago, but this is a continuation of that. So we will continue to go through this.
And I'll just add one last thing. If you do spend some time reading the operations and maintenance section, we did identify some areas that we'd call priorities to focus on bar ditch improvements. So each of those, that was an example there.
That's stuff that city staff, our current city.
Or Air National Guard, yeah.
Or did get into
Yeah.
the city equipment, but then the city wouldn't be using the equipment when we gave it to them. But yeah, and that's what Devin was doing, it's just that program didn't continue on because of other things.
It was a little bit further down, Scott.
Oh, it's further down?
Yeah.
Go to the next one, next page. Or next
There
one.
you go, right there.
Here,
Yep,
or
one more.
this one?
Keep going down. So that's an example of, is that?
That's Geneva Street.
Geneva in the Athens area, but that's an example of recognizing that, if you have a $5-10 million project, that's a huge project for any size community. So this is an option that's available this is not going to fix the major flood event, but it's going to help in the interim, and so that's an option to investigate and talk about.
Will you scroll down to that map?
The figure.
So what is the green, what is the red?
We try to take a stab at just prioritizing in what sequence of ditches would you do first and second. So the red were highlighted as critical, and so you'd start with those red ones and then kind of make your way up the system.
And this is to reestablish the flow, to ensure they're flowing in the direction the arrow is pointed.
Right.
Perfect. And this helps out with one of the highest impacted areas.
Yes.
The one that Herb was just talking about, yeah.
It helps. It's not straightforward, though. Just as you create these ditches, there's driveways, there's mailboxes, there's roadway crossings, utilities, different things that need to be, determined before we just start going out there and excavating ditches.
And when you get all that water to the southeast end of that rectangle, it's got to go somewhere. Not to
You ain't gonna drive across it.
Well, all of the water that comes out of that right there goes right through Bob Lee's front yard. I've seen it, you know, I mean, honestly, the thing that's not addressed on here is what happens once it gets down to the bottom of that, because when we went through during the major flood,
Davis Street was underwater.
was it 2 years ago? Yeah, it was.
Gentile Street was underwater.
Oh,
It
we
was
had
2
it
feet
flowing down
underwater.
our hill, and we had a new couple move into Rod, in them's house, and they moved the rocks that Rod had there as a dam, and went right over into their house. Yeah.
And
What are these
it's not
rocks?
immediately apparent on the exhibit, but it needs to be taken all the way to the river.
Right.
Yeah. I got a couple of questions. So on one of your, on this stuff right here, there's only one where there's a suggestion of purchasing land, and this is just this estimates you guys got here, that's just a fluctuation of today's current for price of land, or what?
Right, I mean, these are representing today's prices, so,
Okay.
you know, if 5 years from now, we revisit the CIP,
It could go up.
we need to revisit the numbers.
Okay. And then my other question is regarding the Garcia Creek project. I drive that bridge all the time, and yes, it's a concern. You guys, it's mentioned hard armor and soft armor. What, can you explain those?
Right, so there on that culvert crossing, it's scouring out, right? So like underneath the culvert is starting to get compromised.
Yeah.
So we would want to hard armor that area with, it could be concrete, it could be rock riprap, it could be gabion baskets, there's a whole number of different solutions. Along with those side banks, they're very
Yes.
vertical.
And they're collapsing.
You can do what we call soft, which is, let's say, grass or some sort of vegetation stabilization.
Okay.
But we often have to lay back those slopes to back to a stable slope condition. And that means we start to encroach in properties and all sorts of different things. So the hard armoring requires less area. It is more expensive. So we had certain areas where we recommended, where we were more restricted on area, hard armoring, and then where we could do some more natural solutions, we would do that. But
And then-
very high level.
Okay, and then on the backside, the map for it, there's, I didn't know if you took into consideration the flow that comes from this little creek here. Because it floods over here and it flows into that, so that adds even more volume for it. So I didn't know if you guys took that into consideration when you did your calculations and everything.
We looked at flows, but I would say the greatest priority was just how do we stabilize and get it.
And would the
okay.
bridge speed need to be replaced?
We think right now we don't need to replace that we could
Okay.
fill back in, flowable fill, concrete.
But there is a plan B just in case that don't work, right?
Which number was that in the priority, do you remember, Amy?
The Garcia one?
5?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for River Valley, I didn't see any suggestions or anything like that for River Valley.
13.
Yeah. So.
I know that's another problem area.
Right.
3.
Chart number 6.
Okay, I'm getting there.
There it is, right there.
Yeah.
Garcia, number 3.
Well.
Great, yeah, and then River Valley is another one that's.
Number 1.
Yeah. I'm sorry, asking all these questions because people are gonna ask me.
Sure. No, these are great questions. Let me see here.
Because I know that drainage for the first one, if that backs up, that just adds to problems on River Valley,
Right.
which is destroying the roads there with all the potholes and everything.
So it is in the we have a summary in the
Okay.
appendix. It's a like one of these one sheets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we talk a little bit about River Valley in there as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Appreciate it.
for all the
Thank
time
you,
and
Mayor. Thank you,
effort that
Council.
went into this. I look forward to beginning this. It's been a long time coming.
Thank you, Amy.
Yes.
All right. Next item is discussion and possible action on Castroville Medina County Joint Airport Zoning Board Ordinance. So I wanted to be clear on this. There was a question about this. We have an executive session item later on. We are purposely addressing this now, and then we'll be talking about how we move forward with some legal issues as we move forward. That's what that was about. There was a question about that. I just want to be clear on this. So on number 10, I think that everybody's pretty well aware of what's going on or what has happened with the Airport Zoning Board. The county withdrew their participation. They rescinded their resolution in support of the board, so they no longer belong to the board. With the current boundaries, Lacoste is actually within the impacted area, or the impacted general area. So we have to look at how we deal with that. So basically right now, the thing that we should do tonight, the thing that I'm recommending that we do is go ahead and revoke the ordinance that we have that creates this board, or how do we deal with the ordinance that we currently have?
So at this point, what we need is just some direction from council as to what they want to see included within the actual.
That's actually secondary. So first, we have the ordinance that is in place right now. We have a board that's in place. Do we, because we have to reset this board. We have to reset the ordinance. There are some things that are not in there. We'll talk about that in a second. But how do we deal with the current ordinance that we know that we have to modify, that has board members on it? How do we deal with that?
So my suggestion would be that we rescind and replace that ordinance. And so that's why I was saying, we just need to know what direction does the council want us to go. We need some direction on what does council want to see regarding appointment of the board.
Members.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to get into that in just a second, but the immediate action that I'm recommending is that we rescind the current ordinance, and then the way that we move forward, based on what we've talked about, would be to, we have to reestablish the board. I mean, this is something that it's a requirement for the FAA. It is a requirement to make sure that our airport is supported, that we do our due diligence with the airport. There's funding that's tied up in this. So it's something that we need to do. It is the responsible thing. The way that we do that, we build in some, we definitely learned from this. We learned what they learned in 1990 or 91 and didn't resolve it then. So we can't just kick it down the road another 30 years and let somebody else deal with it. So we need to deal with it right now. So what I would recommend is that we give general direction right now, but develop the plan very specifically. And I think what that looks like is having our city attorney work with the TxDOT, aviation, and or FAA attorneys, and to get the actual requirements. They finally gave us the 7 items, but to have them work through that so that FAA or TxDOT Aviation can say, these are our requirements. Our legal counsel can challenge those and say, so how do we enforce that? Because it's not legal to, or we agree that, so basically it's getting to the point where their requirements go through our legal counsel to ensure that it is legal to do that it is enforceable, and that it fits with what their needs are. So I think that once that happens, then we can recreate the board after we go through and find out what their minimum requirements are, and then we build some additional safeguards into the ordinance, which would probably, and this is something that we need to work on putting together, but it would be things like ensuring that the board can only approve, they can't approve a final version until the draft has been approved. The only way that the draft can be approved is after it has gone through the legal counsel for any areas that are impacted in that. So if Lacoste is in that area, then it would be Lacoste attorney, it would be Castroville attorney, and we know that Medina County is in there, so it would also be their attorney, would have to approve that before it could go back to the board for a final approval. Once it goes back to the board for a final approval, they could only approve that version of it. If they wanted to modify it, then it goes back into draft. And then include some communication requirements in it, include some time delays, so you have this many meetings. We have a lot of laws that require time between different sections of it. So I think that the responsible thing for us to do is to go back and do that. So for right now, I think that the action is simply to rescind that ordinance. If this is a direction that you agree with, then we provide guidance to our council and to our city staff that this is the way that we want to move forward, and then we'll come back once that's put together and do it better. So let me open that up to questions, comments, concerns.
Can I go first?
Yes.
I thought when we did this the first time, not in 90, but I thought we had to work with the county. And we had to have this joint city-county because so much of the county was affected. Is that
So I didn't.
still true?
Yeah, no, it absolutely has to be. So part of this, I think part of the ordinance that we recreate states if the area being covered that is included in the zone touches any other legal jurisdiction, then they automatically have representation on the board. If it touches Lacoste within the parameters that our legal counsel sets up, whether it's in their ETJ or within their city limits, if it touches them, then they automatically have.
I want to clarify, the reason Lacoste was excluded for the original ordinance is that we're still working off of, so this council did not establish an ordinance. The city is working off of the ordinance that already existed. And in that ordinance 20 years ago, they made the decision to exclude Lacoste, that there was a back and forth between the city of Lacoste and Castroville Airport and the representatives from what was the predecessor to the current TxDOT Aviation. And they advised that they didn't really need their airspace controls to be that big, and so Lacoste didn't have to be included. And so Lacoste wasn't, and everybody was okay with that back then. And so the ordinance got drafted without Lacoste as a member. Fast forward to today, we were implementing this, and now we've had this open discussion with community involvement. It's become apparent that it's possible, and it's still not, if we talk, I know there's been a lot of discussion about adopting the minimum requirements. Well, I don't know, as your staff representative, whether the minimum requirements will include Lacoste or not.
Exactly, and that's why you put it in the ordinance that if another jurisdiction is being impacted, they would have to do the enforcement of it. They would have to do the policing of it.
Well,
So,
well, it's still tied into that question.
Yep.
You had suggested that the city attorney meet with the Department of Aviation, but also can the city attorney or somehow somebody enter into communication with the county and make sure that, because I still think it would be better to have a joint.
no, we have to, so we
But
have.
work a deal with the county also.
Well, and some of these things, I will say, it's, I do need to give y'all some legal advice, but I can't give it out here, in open session. And so to that end, I don't know if it's easier for y'all to get some of this legal advice and get some of that information y'all need. I think that would help y'all
So
figure out
tabled-
what y'all want to do with items.
No, I don't think we're tabling. I think
No,
that-
until after we have our
No.
executive session, okay?
No, I don't think we're tabling it. If I can recommend this, I think that the vote tonight, or the motion that I would be looking for is to rescind the ordinance, and then the direction, not a decision, the direction would be to go through the process to recreate it in a way that is legal, that is appropriate, and that's part of what this.
I think it's very important that we should take action to rescind the ordinance tonight. I would support,
Absolutely.
and I would be willing to make a motion, but I'd like to hear the rest of the council's opinion.
And if we're going to do that, I
have to
will
remove
tell
the
you all
board
that
members.
that y'all can make that as a minute order tonight, but we will actually you would actually have to ratify the ordinance at the next meeting.
Yeah, because ordinance is going to be impacted by an ordinance, right? But
Right.
what I'm going to suggest,
In the
and
minutes tonight,
Okay.
as
I know,
a minute order.
well, I know you're anxious to take action. We're not saying don't take action tonight, but what I would strongly suggest is maybe we take because you can take action after executive session. I would suggest, even if the action is rescinding the ordinance, you can still do that, but I would suggest that maybe we have the executive session, hear the counsel from our attorney, and then take that action if that is the action. Number one, we can figure out what the motion needs to be and what all it needs to include, because it may need to include more than just rescinding it.
All right. So,
As we just heard, it requires an ordinance to eliminate an ordinance, and we need to word that ordinance very carefully.
okay. So then we're going to move this, we're going to, I guess we move this to after executive session?
Yeah, that's what I'm...
Do we need a motion to move that, or can I just move that? Okay, I'm just going to move that till after executive session.
Sorry, that was Christopher.
Okay, is that all right? All right, so So we're going to move.
Scheduling this after executive.
Yeah, we're going to reschedule this one. The next one is discussion and possible action on strategic priorities. In this, we're going to talk about review of strategic priorities from our 2022 workshop. We're going to talk about connecting Castroville strategy and progress, and we're going to talk about identification and prioritization planning efforts. And that C is actually a kind of a part of A, but let's start with a review of the strategic priorities from the 2022 workshop. What Scott was asking us to do, I think that we wanted to actually do a page turn with this. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm getting to it, so
Okay.
I can help you all with that.
Why don't you introduce it, and then I'll walk us through it?
Okay.
All right.
1 second. So turn this off. In May of last year, you all did a retreat with Ron Cox, and the summation of that retreat, it was a strategic planning retreat, among other things. But the summation of that is this report that he delivered. It's a 35-page report, where he encapsulated some of the discussion that took place, the priorities and values and other things that you identified. And what I would like to do, and this will bleed into our executive session discussion as well, as my contract comes up, one of the things that I'm always kind of a little concerned about is how do I prove that I've been successful as a city administrator in leading the city in the direction that you all, my collective bosses, would have me do. And this effort with Ron Cox is one way to kind of get us towards that. And I know one of the things that she and I were supposed to do out of that was to help develop a balanced scorecard. That has not happened yet for a lot of reasons. Most notably, all the development and the time drain that has been in dealing with these developers and preparing for what they're doing.
Just let me know.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is focus on these, what are the strategic priorities and focus areas that the council developed as part of that retreat process, that workshop process with Ron Cox. So you can find that in your packet. We'll get to what page it's on in just a second.
It's all the way to the back.
Well, I think that we're actually, are you talking about the strategic focus areas?
Yeah, I was going to get to there, but I'll highlight this real quick. So
I think we actually start on number 4, unless you had a different one.
Page 4?
Yeah, page 4.
Yeah, I was, in the interest of time, I was trying not to go too far back, but.
Well, I think that we start with, are you ready to start the page turn, or did you want to?
Yeah, well, is this the page we're talking about when we say page 4?
Page number 4, yes. It begins with mayor and council have the following attributes.
Yeah.
I think the next one we start with some of the commitments that we made. We look at where we've accomplished them. We question the ones that we have on here, and we can do some actual modification here.
That's fine.
Okay.
So, well, this isn't an editable document, but yes, we can make notes.
Minus.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll make notes.
All right. So, so the first couple of pages, it kind of talks about just the structure of it, what the intent was, what people had put together with it. Where we start talking about some of the decisions that we had made, begin with the second item here on page number 4. That is, mayor and council of the city of Castroville will lead by. These were decisions that we would that we had made on how we would engage and how we would lead. Those include active listening, willing to engage the detractors, getting hard issues out for discussions, act with integrity, honesty, and truth, lead by example, which is leading consistently with how you live, be willing to show one believes what one says, being present and hardworking, be active, be a part of the solution, lead with humility, play the facilitator role in arriving at solutions, let others come to the conclusion on matters where possible, be diplomatic and patient, plan, and be dedicated believers and champions. Are there any of those that you no longer believe that we need to lead by, or are there any additions that we don't have? No?
I think it's a good list.
Perfect.
from my perspective, I think as a council, I have to applaud your effort to do these things. Certainly to staff, it's very visible that these things matter, in the emphasis on communication, working with the public, reminding us who we serve and why we serve. It's evident that these aren't just words on a paper. I mean, this is something we're really trying to implement. So I applaud your effort in doing that. It's much more difficult to come up with additions sometimes, because this is a pretty comprehensive list.
And we will we'll continue this in I think we're doing June for our next planning workshop. But I wanted to go over this and just call these out. So the other ones are the mayor and council of the city of Castroville will communicate with each other by being respectful, respectfully and with respect. I don't know what that means. It's kind of free. Well, we've got respectfully and with respect. Talk with others, have two-way conversations, asking, telling toward understanding. Well, okay, so I don't know that. We'll have to.
Typo.
So what he did was he did a direct. He just took the notes from all of our brainstorming.
And typed them all in.
Yeah, well, we'll listen. So the other ones are active listening, stay calm, acknowledge the shortfalls, they will occur. I call that embracing the red. When things are messed up, let's acknowledge them and understand them. Finding, stating, and communicating the shared vision, being a visionary at the helm, begin with common ground, show vision in budgets and operations, be inclusive, seeking the ideas of others, verify what we have heard, create clarity, generate energy, and deliver the results, quantify the results, and report out on the results. Is there anything that is not stood out?
This is how you're going to communicate with each other.
I'd like to say something about this.
Absolutely.
I know when we did this, I thought it was a very good exercise. But when I think back about what's happened since we did this to today, I think we're letting ourselves get caught up into the idea that everybody believes that everything is we're all serendipity. And I know, Mayor, you say that a lot, that you're very pleased with the fact that we always seem to find the common ground, which I think is true in most cases. But I think it's very important that not everybody, I'm speaking for myself, not everybody believes in everything to the level that we seem to espouse. For example, I have a lot of different thoughts about some of the things we've done. And I feel like I get pushed off to the side of the road because I'm not going along with the rest of the people on the council. And I think there needs to be some room in this plan to discuss things that maybe aren't the common. Because I feel very bad when I get pushed off the road and then it just dies. And so I'm just one person, and maybe I'm just too thin-skinned, but I think there has to be room for dissent, and there has to be room for reconsideration down the road as people's ideas may get changed as time goes on. But not everybody is going to agree with every facet of everything we do. And we should be able to accept that and continue to work together with the same level of respect, even though some of us may not agree with everything. And
So
that
I'm going to challenge you on here. I challenge you on that. So the thing that I don't find in here is that we will always agree together. So that is not in here.
Well, I didn't see that in here.
What is in here is acknowledge the shortfalls, they will occur. Be inclusive, seeking the ideas of others, and that is each other, that is actively looking for this. I added on here, advocate for ourselves and each other, and I think that we had something in here that, no, I think what we would add in here to that is accept that we will not always agree. And to me, that was kind of implied through some of these other ones, but if that is something that you feel we have fallen short on or miscommunicated or is insinuated by this, then let's just state it straight out and just say, accept.
I'd like to see a bullet that says dissent is normal, because it is. We're always going to have some part of an idea that we can't come to agreement on.
I think Phil and I have also been the one dissenting vote a number of times, and there's an old phrase that I heard years ago, and that is, if we all think the same thing, somebody's not thinking. So,
Well, and when I facilitated this this stuff with balanced scorecard and everything, the main thing that we were told, is, yep, you're going to disagree, but you discuss it respectfully, calmly, and then you all learn to, if you can live with it, we're good. No one's going to agree altogether, just as long as we can have the conversation, everybody has a voice, and we can, pick and choose to make sure, because it's going to happen no matter what avenue you're in.
So what I added on here, and I want to make sure that I'm capturing what you're saying here, Herb, advocate for ourselves and for each other. And this has happened a couple of times. I've heard people that have called out and said, wait, I think that they're actually trying to say this. Or I don't feel like they've been heard, I don't feel like they've been answered. So we should advocate for ourselves, and where we don't feel like it, or where others recognize that, I think that we need to advocate for others as well. And the other one is accept that we will not always agree and be okay with that. Does that capture that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. What else? Is there any other way that you feel like maybe you felt like we had come to an agreement that you don't agree with in this, how we interact with each other? You can think about this. I'm asking off the top of your head. I think about it, and let's continue. Make notes on this. We will revisit this in June. We can modify. This isn't like a policy document. This is just kind of a general guidance, and it's something really good to look through and reevaluate. Okay. Unless there's another idea, I'm going to move on to the next one. So the mayor and council of the city of Castroville expect the following of each other: to be respectful of each other, votes matter, the outcomes are important, respect the outcomes, trust the process, but don't have analysis paralysis, ask, be patient with each other, to challenge each other, including boards and commissions, to ensure they know and share the vision, find and maintain alignment among the members. That doesn't mean agreement, that means alignment. And sometimes disagreement is the alignment. We accept that we don't appreciate the decision that was made.
And that's setting the common ground first.
Yes. Do you feel like that needs to be added here, or are you just clarifying?
I think that's what it says.
Perfect.
I would suggest you add it if it's not there.
Okay.
And
I thought that's what it says.
How did you?
That's fine. We can clarify.
How did you state that?
Find the common ground first.
Well, yeah, so find and maintain alignment among the members. Maybe put a dash, find the common ground first, just as a point of clarity.
Yeah, no, there's another one that kind of speaks to this.
I recommend.
It says begin with the common ground.
It says follow the chain of command. We don't have a chain of command. That's a military term. We do not have a chain of command. The mayor is not the commander. The city administrator is not the commander.
That is incorrect.
We are a body that is working in unity, and I think that.
Well, let me clarify what you're saying. I see what you're saying with that. The chain of command is we don't go to a water line worker and give them instructions. So following the chain of the command, because remember this, what we're talking about, this is on the mayor and council of the city of Oh, no,
Mayor and council of the city of Castroville.
My apologies. You're absolutely right.
We have an ordinance that tells the city council they can't go down.
Another way to say that instead of chain of command is maybe respect the roles and responsibilities that you each have. So the mayor does have, yeah.
Well, we say that in the very first item, is be respectful of each other.
Yeah, this
okay,
is
I apologize. Or I was thinking it was the next thing.
I just felt like that's kind of a misnomer.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe I'm just sensitive because I'm an old Army guy.
I was going to ask the question too, Herb, you're not alone.
Perfect. Well, one of you said it.
Yeah, these are notes from that meeting.
Yeah.
Glad y'all are catching this.
Well, I think that this is good because we didn't go back and review them. And part of this is just reviewing what we had talked about before.
But I think it's important that we expect of each other that we don't interfere with, we don't bypass Scott.
But this is,
An ordinance there.
but this is mayor and council expect of each other. This is each
And
other.
I don't expect Paul to go, I guess we don't have to call it chain of command, but I think we expect each other to follow our ordinances. I don't know.
the way
Respect
that-
change of authority.
Well, so the way I would state it in a different way is respect the roles of the council manager form of government. If that's appropriate for this section, and I think that's what the mayor was debating, is whether or not that needs to be here because it's about how you interact with each other. But I hear what you're saying, Phil. I mean, it's whether what's the expectation you have of your fellows, and one of them would be that they respect the roles and responsibilities of the form of government that you're operating with.
Right, I think this may have come from the fact that we had a situation where the council member was directly interfering with staff members.
And that,
And I think so. I think
long
we
time
added
ago.
it
Yeah.
to put that in there.
Yeah, because I don't want to have to go and talk in council or talk and say, listen, Paul, you shouldn't have done what you did.
Yeah, I know.
And so,
Yeah, it's cool.
and so I think we do have
It
to
works,
respect
though.
each other, that we are going to be respectful of our roles and not.
Okay, so how about if we change, or we add on to the first one, and it says, be respectful of each other and the roles,
Well, I think Scott said it very well, the form of
The
government.
yeah, respect the roles of the council manager form of government.
respect
The roles.
and the roles
Of
of the
city
council.
government. City government.
Of the council manager.
/ administrative form of government.
Yep.
Form of government.
Okay, great.
Take out chain of command.
I took out chain. Okay, perfect.
No more chains.
No more chains. Let's leave all the chains on the side. Leave them with the balls.
Communicate with each other. Hey, look at that. All right.
Okay, so let me make sure, I'm going to go back up. Votes matter, the outcomes are important, respect the outcomes. Trust, we went through that. Be patient with each other, to challenge each other, including, yeah, we already talked about. So I think that we're through this, communicate to each other, staff and citizens. I think that captures it, yeah? All right. Next item, mayor and council expect the following of staff. To be the implementers of the shared vision and policies, to be the implementers of the budget, to inform council and community-related issues, to follow the chain of command, report on progress regularly, communicate issues to council sooner than later, be prepared to be right a lot, pay attention to the details, admit when you're wrong, remember the council is human and makes mistakes as well, and to have mutual trust and respect. Is there anything that you feel should change on this?
Just flip the chain of command.
Okay.
What's that?
The
Bullet 4.
1, 2, 3. Bullet 4 says to follow the chain of command.
Okay.
Well, we do expect them to follow the chain of command.
Right.
The staff.
That is staff, that's not each other.
Follow the staff, okay. Correct.
Okay, I just,
It was just,
everybody was harping on chain of command, and.
Well,
we
because
just-
there's defined chain of command
staff,
in city
there is-
staff, but there's,
Well-
staff, there is chain of command.
Well, I was just thinking department leadership, so.
so, and I want to call out three of these things. So communicate issues to council sooner than later, that was an expectation that we provided, and they've done a phenomenal job of that, to be prepared to be right a lot, and they have done better and better on that. Pay attention to the details, and these are things that we have said we expect of you, and I think that they are doing these really, really well. Same thing with informing council of community-related issues, and then the the implementers, I would say, fine job on implementing the shared visions and policies. You see this a lot through the parks, through the streets, through all of the utility improvements. They have taken the vision that has been given to them by council decisions and really worked hard to implement them. So I think these are things that we, and implementers of the budget, the things that you've been doing on the budget are just outstanding. I cannot tell you how impressed I've been with that. So I would say that, overall, this is something that staff has done exceptionally well under the leadership of Scott Dixon. Next, the staff expects the following of the mayor and council.
Explain that first one, too.
For council to be aware that they are doing things that
Yeah, I was reading that over that too, because it's not, I think it's to, maybe
they
there's a.
can do things.
Or to be aware when, or I don't know.
They're doing things that do not honor staff.
Here, how about for council to be aware that.
I can simplify it. Don't throw staff under the bus. That's the expectation, that you don't show up at a council meeting and say, I saw Jose out there and he was really lazy. He wasn't doing, whatever. Those are perfect conversations to have with me, but don't do it in a way that would, be disrespectful. I think that's what that means. If you want to strike that and just say don't throw them under the bus, I think that's probably what that means.
Well, how do you say don't throw them under the bus?
Don't throw them under the bus.
Don't throw them under the bus.
That's how you say it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Approach city administrator about concerns with staff.
Don't throw staff under the bus unless it's deserving.
So, be aware of staff morale and how the council can affect it.
Oh, yes.
That is a really important thing.
Yes.
You think of, so a lot of the staff, especially the department heads, but quite honestly, a lot of the staff, they watch the meetings, they see how we interact, they see how we respect, and they'll find the errors that we make. I know that there have been some ways that we have phrased things that just aren't as respectful. I think that it goes back to that. And so.
And I apologized for mine. I made one of those faux pas.
I've done it too.
Well, hey,
so that was when
I own up with it.
The next
I
is
apologize
when council does something wrong, something to wrong staff. And that I think we have done.
Yep.
And we would like feedback as well from your department heads. For council to have staff's back. To have a relationship of trust and respect. I think we're still working on that one. To be consistent in actions and in the vision. I think that council has been really good about that, actually. Providing direction, being very clear. What I had seen in the past was, and this is years ago, the staff would bring something that the council had asked for, and the council said, no, that's not what we're asking for, go back and fix it. Please.
I'd like to talk to that one a second.
Absolutely.
Here's the example I use. We did a workshop last summer, and we set some goals. I think one of the goals we set was to try to keep the tax rate consistent for the next 5 years. But we forget it's a goal. You don't always achieve every goal. So don't go back a year or two later when some member of the council says, well, I think things have changed. We need to rethink this. It doesn't mean that they're straying off the path of the commitment to try to achieve the goal.
Absolutely.
We're all trying to achieve those goals. We're all doing the best we can. But things change.
Is there something?
Stuff happens.
Absolutely. But is there something in here that?
Well, just the idea that once you make a commitment to a goal doesn't mean you're locked in and cannot ever change your mind. And I think there has to be room to be able to go back and discuss, well, situation is different.
Absolutely.
Maybe we need to rethink this for these reasons. Maybe we have to say we can't achieve that goal and we need to modify the goal.
So I think that the intent, maybe we need to rewrite this. So the intent is to be consistent in actions and in the vision. That doesn't mean that part of operations is that things will change. Scott says it quite often about the budget. The budget is a place and time, and there will always be budget modifications. So it is more about being consistent in the actions and in the vision. And when you're asking them to do things, that it is consistent. You're not asking them to do
Well,
conflicting items.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want to be clear on that, because it's not, consistent is not rigid.
Right.
Consistent is not inflexible. Consistent simply means that if you've said, hey, we want to invest in employees, and that's a really important thing. We want to invest in training, et cetera. That's part of our goal and objective. But then, when the budget comes around and you understand, we all make, there may be a time when we have to make sacrifices, et cetera. Just to be consistent. Be consistent. And I think the rest of it speaks to that. To share the vision and make reasoned and fair decisions. These are your expectations. Not.
Well, we could be consistent